Chapter 350, Amethyst-Thorned Island. 1. Nangong Liujue simply could not have imagined, originally, that meek like a kitten Su Luo, who had strived very hard again and again only to obtain one glance from him, would now use this kind of mocking tone and taunting manner to speak with him. Nangong Liujue furiously hollered, "Loathsome girl, granted, even if you are not this prince's legal imperial concubine, you also have to become my concubine on the side. You think you can escape from this? Why haven't you quickly crawled back to this king?" Saying this, Nangong Liujue was about to go pull Su Luo again. Originally, he really didn't have any interest in Su Luo, but after hearing that this loathsome girl had unexpectedly and quietly cultivated to the 3rd rank, she was so gifted that it simply shocked people. Even more, she was someone Nangong Luyun fancied. From childhood to adulthood, he and Nangong Luyun had always been irreconcilable. Things that Nangong Luyun wanted, he must grab it back. Even if he couldn't snatch it back, he must also destroy it. Nangong Liuyun's sword-like eyebrows knitted slightly, he faintly swept Nangong Liujue a glance. This glance appeared to be light as a cloud or gentle as a breeze, but was overcast with a bloody ruthlessness that threatened to vent its anger violently. This gave Nangong Liujue a severe cold feeling. The temperature was like being in an icehouse. Bei Qining smiled faintly and raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Nangong Liujue, how did our home sister-in-law become your concubine on the side? You still have the nerve to say this out loud. Also, why haven't you looked in the mirror to see what kind of revolting person you are?" Bei Qining had always been merciless towards the crown prince, never giving him face. Nangong Liujue's complexion was ashen. He had choked back a breath and was just about to curse out loud, when Lan Xian stole his thunder to get there first. Lan Xian put on a grown-up manner, hardening his face to lecture Nangong Liujue, "You, as a person, are really something. The crown prince should have the poise and character of a crown prince. Look at our home Zanya, proper and impressive in appearance, elegantly poised. This is the demeanor of a proper crown prince. When you have time, learn to emulate him a little more." Nangong Liujue, a high and mighty crown prince, as a respected elder, was reprimanded like a little brother would be. He was infuriated to the point of snarling in rage at them. This time, he was cut off by a glance from Anya Ming. "Want to continue being the crown prince smoothly and steadily, then manage well your small piece of land. Extending your hand that far, aren't you afraid of having it chopped off?" These 3 people, each and every one of their background was not small. When speaking, each of them was fiercer and more poisonous than the other. They simply overwhelmed the crown prince, who was too weary to cope. With great difficulty, he waited until the 3 of them finished lecturing him in a row. Then the crown prince finally had a chance to glare at Su Luo in rage. "I'm giving you one last chance. Are you going to follow this prince to walk away or not?" Those 3 people, he could not afford to offend, but Su Luo was merely a tiny ant that he could pinch into a sphere or roll flat between his fingers. Unexpectedly, this tiny ant was already not that ant from the olden days. Now, her complexion was indifferent. The words she said were even more poisonous than the 3 of them added together. "Nangong Liujue, you think you are the crown prince? In my eyes, you are no better than a beggar. Want this lady to follow you? You're wishful thinking. In your dreams. Su Luo." The crown prince was ridiculed again, and was simply put in an awkward situation, unable to get out. Originally, he still believed that Su Luo would at least give him some face. He still thought that Su Luo at least cared about him from her old affections. Back then, as long as he gave her one glance, she would almost start to fly. Didn't expect, never expected. The crown prince's expression hazed over and changed the topic of conversation with a mocking tone. "Oh, this is because you bumped into a backer, full of confidence, right? You better not think he will marry you. You are merely someone he is toying with and nothing more. After this event, will you still be crying and calling, coming over to beg for this king?" Nangong Luyun, who had been standing by the side since the beginning and hadn't talked, displayed a concentrated icy intent with his body. He was cold as frost, his dark red lips slowly hooking up. An ice-cold disdainfulness flashed through his eyes as he cast frosty side glances at the Crown Prince. You have an objection? Chapter 351, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 2. Even though it was only 4 short words, it was like the calm before the storm. The oppressive atmosphere stifled the words in the Crown Prince's heart. If you don't want to continue being the Crown Prince, then just say so, don't beat around the bush like this. Nangong Liuyan's cold gaze looked sharply at the Crown Prince, his handsome face was saturated with a dense, murderous aura. His eyes were like frost, with his entire person appearing bloodthirsty, ruthless, cruel and stormy. Nangong Liujue was immediately choked off, looking like someone had very firmly squeezed his neck. No matter what, he couldn't speak. Beichening covered his lips, smiling happily as he said to the 2 people beside him, actually, Nangong's words are incorrect. Guys, think about it, an incapable person as a crown prince is a good crown prince. Having such a crown prince in position, the person sitting as the emperor, how comfortable and happy he ought to be. You guys say, isn't it right? Lan Xian, who was always in cahoots with Beichening, pretended to be surprised and opened his eyes wide. Oh heavens, an incapable person sitting on the position. Who are you referring to? Is it this person in front of us? Lan Xian had a surprised tone with exaggerated movements. His voice was loud but just right, people within several tens of meters of his body could all hear him. In an instant, the Crown Prince's complexion became very red, so red that you could even squeeze water droplets out. The expression he used to glare at Lan Xian was practically itching to ruthlessly devour him. However, Beichening hadn't planned to let him go just yet, and continued with Lan Xian to play off of each other. Of course, otherwise, who else is there? This talk has already been widely spread throughout the entire Eastern Ling's capital. You are actually this ill-informed and ignorant. I order all of you to shut up. The Crown Prince's complexion was as black as the bottom of a pot. He coldly and gloomily glared at Su Luo, itching to strike her dead on the spot. It was all this loathsome girl. At that time, when he went to Su Manor to break off the engagement, this loathsome girl had misheard his words and yelled it out loud in astonishment. Thus, this matter about him was spread far and wide. Now, the Crown Prince was very suspicious. That day, what the loathsome girl had yelled out, was it because she really misheard, or did she do it on purpose? Consider you guys got this one, I will remember this treatment. By all means, don't end up in my hand, otherwise, the Crown Prince coldly glared at Nangong Liuyan and gave a few heavy humps. He took along a group of subordinates and left grandiosely. The back of that person, no matter how you looked, seemed to cut a very sorry figure. Beichening smiled happily and said to Su Luo, sister-in-law, don't mind him, this Crown Prince is just like that. He lacks being scolded and cursed at, after being abused verbally a few times by others, he will be more straightforward. Otherwise, he won't be able to sleep at night. Seeing Beichening having an expression of being very knowledgeable about the Crown Prince, Su Luo felt it was extremely funny. You are very blunt and rude to him. Naturally, every time we meet, he cannot do without me cursing him a few sentences. However, every time, he still laps it up and moves his face closer. You tell me if this person is worthless or not. Beichening smiled very self-satisfiedly and proudly. His smile was radiating with delight while he danced and gestured with joy. Nangong Liuyan glanced at Su Luo with a considering look, seeing her expression was calm, his red, translucent and moist lips smiled. His smile reached his eyes, making them seem intoxicatingly full of soft, yielding waves. He led her along by the hand, let's go hook some fish. Okay. Su Luo also felt that her mood shouldn't be ruined by a mad dog that suddenly jumped out of nowhere. She flung her head and very quickly threw the Crown Prince out of her head. This group of people divided up the areas of Amethyst-Thorned Island. The best area on the island was divided into 2. In the order of first come first served, the best places on the east side were occupied by the subordinates and powers that were affiliated with the crown prince. The so-called best spot was where people hooked the most amethyst-thorn fishes from the previous years. However, Nangong Luyun wasn't superstitious about this. He led Su Luo and walked towards the crag on the west side. According to their strength right now, if they wanted to snatch the position, naturally the crown prince's forces wouldn't be able to beat them. Only, Nangong Luyun was too lazy to bother to deal with the crown prince. Chapter 352, Amethyst-Thorned Island. 3. The two of them sat on the rock rampart on the crag, with both legs dangling in midair. The breeze brushed by, swaying the ink-black strands of hair, giving off a hint of an especially indolent and idle appearance. Nangong Luyun took out a series of equipment and helped Su Luo set up her fishing rod properly. Hand in hand, he taught her how to fish for the amethyst-thorned fish. After Su Luo learned from his demonstrations, he sat in a place very close to Su Luo and started angling. Su Luo, full of interest, gazed fixedly at the fishing rod. This fishing rod's design was very peculiar. The dark-colored fishing rod was suffused with a faint gloss, emitting a spirit aura. Compared to the fishing rod from her previous life, it was simply as different as night and day. When fishing, it was not as simple as just carrying the fishing rod in hand. Rather, you must pour your spirit power into the fishing rod and carefully sense the situation on the seafloor, then little by little, lure the amethyst-thorned fish to take the bait. In the beginning, Su Luo was still full of interest, and with single-minded devotion, poured her spirit power into the fishing rod to sense the world at the bottom of the ocean. After more than an hour had passed, she didn't even see a shadow of an amethyst-thorned fish, and lost some of the mood. She placed both hands under her chin, bored to death. She started to glance around at her surroundings in her boredom. No wonder Anya Ming and Lan Xian made a vow of not wanting any amethyst-thorned fish she hooked. As it turned out, they already knew earlier that she would not be able to hook an amethyst-thorned fish. However, in more than an hour, Nangong Luyun already caught 5 fishes, Anya Ming caught 3, behind the 2, Lan Xian and Bai Chening both caught 2. Only her, not to mention a fish, she couldn't even get her hands on a fish scale, truly embarrassing. Alas! Su Luo was bored senseless and started to complain to the little divine dragon through their mind link, too embarrassing, too embarrassing, too embarrassing. The little divine dragon went a-woo, while thinking it over. All of a sudden, he extended his little paw and pointed at that deep pool of clear spirit spring. That was to say, the legendary celestial spirit water. You are saying that by using the celestial spirit water, I will be able to hook an amethyst-thorned fish? Su Luo asked, somewhat unconvinced. The little divine dragon opened its pair of huge eyes wide, cleverly nodded and stammeringly said, fish, fish, food, food. The little divine dragon, who was trying to learn human dialect, was afraid that he wasn't clear, so finally, he flopped about on his belly acting out the motions of a fish being hooked. That comical and adorable little action simply made Su Luo so pleased and entertained, that she uttered a light laugh. What happened? Not being able to hook a fish and still in such a cheerful mood? Before, Nangong Luyun was still worried that this girl would be upset from not hooking a single amethyst-thorned fish. But, he didn't expect that her attitude was still this good, quite able to amuse herself and be cheerful. Not able to catch a fish. Humph, humph, all of you just wait to be shocked. Su Luo raised an eyebrow, smugly giving him a snort. With the help of the little divine dragon, she didn't believe she wouldn't be able to catch an amethyst fish. If she still couldn't hook a fish, she might as well drop the little divine dragon into the ocean as fish bait. Su Luo took advantage that people weren't watching and noiselessly took out a few drops of celestial spirit water, then, she secretly mixed it into the fish food. The fish food was originally a dark green color, that was then kneaded into little balls of dough. When you baited the hook, you took a little bit of it, and when Su Luo put in a little bit of celestial spirit water, it only made the fish food bait a little more moist. People at the side couldn't tell that there was any difference from before. This fish food was said to have been mixed personally by Nangong Luyun. The sources alone consumed a huge sum. If you didn't have few 10,000 gold coins, you absolutely could not make this fish food bait. Su Luo added the celestial spirit water into the fish food, and stirred it well again, before pinching it into little round balls to put on the fish hook. Her face carried hope, expectation and anticipation. Could or couldn't hook an amethyst thorn fish, will all depend on this trick. Nangong Luyun saw her hook and laughed involuntarily. Where is there someone who fishes like you? The fish food bait is bigger than the mouth of an amethyst thorn fish. How can you catch a fish this way? However, before the smiling expression at the corner of Nangong Luyun's mouth could go down, the fishhook that Su Luo just cast moved slightly. Chapter 353, Amethyst Thorned Island, 4. This meant that the fish took the bait. Su Luo's heart was pleasantly surprised again. She energetically lifted up the fishing rod and lifted her eyes to look. She saw that on her fish hook was actually an awe-inspiring, dazzling, purple amethyst thorned fish. It was about the size of a palm and the amethyst thorned fish looked similar to the crucian carp. Under the illumination of the sunlight, this amethyst thorn fish that was suspended above the water not only didn't swing about struggling to escape, on the contrary, it continued to nibble on the little round ball of fish food bait with great gusto. Su Luo used her strength and flung the rod. In a flash, she flung the amethyst thorned fish ashore. Afterwards, with her mood uplifted, she grabbed the little thing that was still refusing to let go of the fish food. Humans will die for riches, just as birds will for food. The little fish was the same. The amethyst thorned fish only now seemed to have recovered its senses, turning its body to look stupidly at the sea surface not far away. It then looked at the person that caught it, and immediately, it started to struggle non-stop. Su Luo, smiling happily, poked its little head. Oh, now you know to struggle. Too late. While speaking, she tossed this little amethyst thorned fish with teary and misty eyes, into the wooden barrel. Didn't know if Beichening did it on purpose with his distribution of barrels, but he gave Nangong Luyun a huge wooden barrel, while the one arranged for her was one a child would use for playing house, that kind of small bucket. Even if you fill it up, the bucket was one that wouldn't be able to fit more than a few fishes. This was the first time that Su Luo hooked a fish. Naturally, she was a little excited. She gazed at that amethyst thorned fish with an expression of simply loving it too much to part with it. Just when Su Luo was all smiles with elation and immensely proud of herself, and wanted to go tell Nangong Luyun the secret, not far away, Nangong Liujue, escorted by a group of people, grandiosely walked over. The crown prince had his hand linked behind his back and coldly cast a sidelong glance at Su Luo. The corner of his mouth hooked up as he sneeringly said, "Oh, you really did actually catch an amethyst thorned fish. Amazing, I thought you wouldn't be able to catch a single one before this day comes to a close." Su Luo somewhat speechlessly swept this crown prince a glance. She really couldn't understand. She had already said everything very clearly. Why did he still come over to look and to be cursed at? Su Luo didn't feel like paying him any attention. She took out a small ball of fish bait and once again baited the fishhook. Nangong Liujue saw that Su Luo had actually ignored him. His heart became even more angry and he gave a heavy, cold snort. "Loathsome girl, it's now reached to this extent and you are still pretending to be noble and virtuous. When the time comes, see how you will die." Oh. Su Luo unhurriedly cast him a glance and her head lowered as she continued to fiddle with the fish bait. The fish bait was a little too moist, so once she put it in place, it would drop off. Looks like she needed to wait until it dried a little in the sun. You still don't know, right? That second older sister of yours, after returning to her teacher's school, Grandmaster Lon Hai had sent her all kinds of spirit elixir and pills like flowing water, non-stop. Before 1 month is over, she may advance to the 5th rank. At that time, you, a mere little 3rd rank, will still hope to defeat her. Life and death duel, it's to either live or die. you still think you can survive? The Crown Prince smiled complacently. The two misses from the Su family drawing up this life and death duel, it was spread abuzz throughout the entire imperial capital. Now, there practically wasn't anyone who didn't know about it. Even though Su Luo stunned a lot of people by going from a good-for-nothing waste to a third rank, yet nearly everyone was unanimously optimistic about Su Qing. Su Luo gave an "oh" sound in a light as a cloud and soft as the wind manner. Just like this, she had no other words for him. However, her heart was secretly on guard. She originally thought about it, Su Qing's cultivation could increase within a month. But, she hadn't anticipated that Su Qing's teacher's sect would value her this much, the match after a month. Could she really win against her? Nangong Liujue saw Su Luo's lowered eyes in contemplation. Immediately, he was extremely happy. He raised an eyebrow and mockingly sneered at her, "Loathsome girl, now you are afraid, right?" Su Luo raised her eyes, her gaze indifferently landed on his body and she frowned slightly. The Crown Prince took the time to come over in his busy schedule, was it just to inform me of this matter? Chapter 354, Amethyst Thorned Island, 5, the implication being whether he was so idle that he came to look like a pain in the ass. The Crown Prince was immediately blocked by her, and he was choking on a sentence stuck in his throat. He just received the news a moment ago, so naturally, he would come over to taunt Su Luo. Originally, he thought she would be so scared by this news that all the color would bleach out of her face. In this way, he would have avenged his hatred from a moment ago, okay? But, who could have imagined that this loathsome girl's mental strength was pretty good? The expression on her face didn't reveal her mood, or did she seem to be distracted by the news? His gaze landed on that little wooden bucket near Su Luo, and suddenly, he was happy again. Fishing up to now and only hooking one amethyst-thorned fish. You tell me, don't you think this is embarrassing? Nangong Liujue's face was full of disdain, surveying this entire island. When it comes to hooking the least number and at the bottom, this position is yours exclusively. Really embarrassing. Seeing this Crown Prince in front of her always being arrogant and bossy to her, a light bulb turned on in Su Luo's head, and a split second later, an idea appeared. Wasn't Nangong Liujue disdainful of how few amethyst-thorned fishes she had caught? Then, could she use this pretext to extort some stuff from him, making this Crown Prince die from heartache of the loss? Finished thinking, Su Luo gave Nangong Luyun a light tug, stopping his slowly about to stand up figure. This was because under the circumstances of the Crown Prince continuing to provoke Su Luo, Nangong Luyun's complexion had gradually darkened. He had the intent to move at any moment to dispose of him. Su Luo, with great difficulty, had caught this fat cow of a Crown Prince. How could she let this Crown Prince off so easily? Su Luo's smile was not quite a smile as she cast a sidelong glance at the Crown Prince. She lifted an eyebrow and said sarcastically, "You actually looked down on the number of amethyst-thorned fish I caught? Then, do you have the courage to engage in a contest with me? Let's see within a fixed time, which one of us will catch the most number of amethyst-thorned fishes." How could the Crown Prince know that Su Luo had already found the trick to hooking the amethyst-thorned fish? In his eyes, it had taken this long for Su Luo to catch only one amethyst-thorned fish, and that's all. Also, it was so small there couldn't be another that was smaller. Therefore, Su Luo's words hit directly on the Crown Prince's intent, and he could be seen smiling coldly. "Loathsome girl, such big courage, you actually dare to compete with this prince." What, the always boasting that he is incomparably gallant Crown Prince, this time, became a coward. Su Luo directly used taunting methods to spur him into action. The corner of the Crown Prince's mouth evoked into a ridiculing sneer, "Loathsome girl, you ought to know that this prince has already hooked 3 amethyst-thorned fishes up until now. You only caught 1 fish, you sure you want to compete with this prince?" "Humph, I can be killed any time, but won't tolerate any insults. Could it be that you think I would be afraid of you?" Both of Su Luo's cheeks were round from fuming. giving off an appearance of being hot-blooded, easily cheated and letting one's emotions make the decisions. Just now, Nangong Liujue was criticized by Bei Qining and them too wretchedly. He thought that this would be a great opportunity to turn the tables on them. Su Luo's, these words, were right on the money with his intent, but on his face, he faked an expression of having been put into a difficult situation. Humph, competing with you, wouldn't this prince have an unfair advantage? Su Luo secretly looked down on him in her thoughts. She was the most adept at figuring out a person's heart. She could clearly see that the crown prince was obviously secretly, extremely happy to do this, but still put on this kind of act to use all sort of excuses. Who were you trying to fool? Su Luo didn't bother to match his performance and simply turned her body away, unwilling to acknowledge him. Since it is like this, then it's fine not to compete. Your Highness the Crown Prince, please return. The Crown Prince wanted to use declining as a way to advance. Su Luo used the same maneuver of withdrawing to advance forward. This forced the Crown Prince to be flustered and unprepared. The Crown Prince didn't expect that Su Luo would not be drawn to the path he was leading her onto, and an ugly expression flashed through his eyes. But, he was even more enraged and one could see him give a cold snort. Since you, yourself, insist on courting death, then this prince will help you accomplish this task. Want to compete, then let's compete. Bei Qining usually was the one who loved spectacles the most, and was also the one who liked to bicker with the Crown Prince the most. One could see him holding an amethyst thorn fish and leisurely walking over. Chapter 355, Amethyst Thorned Island, 6. Bei Qinying's fishing rod was swinging in a carefree manner over his shoulder and started to talk with scorching satire and frigid irony. Oh, who is pretending as if they are about to lose out? Nangong Liujue, if you have the ability, then don't bully women and have a competition with me instead. When the Crown Prince saw Bei Qining, his temple pulsed fiercely. This person was simply his nemesis in this lifetime. Just seeing him meant nothing good would happen. The Crown Prince sent a resentful glance at Bei Qining. Meddling in other people's business, take a hike to the side. Bei Qining was no longer cheerful. This is my sister-in-law. What do you mean I am meddling in other people's business? Nangong Liujue, the person that needs to take a hike to the side ought to be you. Both of their remarks were not agreeable, thus they started to quarrel noisily. Su Luo was simply dumbfounded watching this scene. One was the respectable and honorable crown prince of an empire, the other was the enigmatic president of the mercenary union. These two masters, normally, in front of other people, appeared to be arrogant, condescending, aloof, and very high and mighty. To those people beneath them, both of their existences were eminent and unapproachable. Yet, who could have anticipated that now, these two extremely honorable personages, would quarrel noisily like immature kids? You say one, I say two, and we're going at it quite energetically. Su Luo had just planned to ruthlessly swindle the Crown Prince in return. How could she look on helplessly and let the Crown Prince escape by turning around and leaving abruptly again? Consequently, she could only come to smooth things over. Okay, both of you stop quarreling. Bei Qining, first, you take a moment to rest. Crown Prince, are we still having this competition? If we are not competing, then go away, don't disturb my mood to fish. Because of you two's sound volume from noisy snarling and roaring, no matter how good the fish bait, it would not be able to hook an amethyst-thorned fish. Su Luo craftily winked at Bei Qining. Bei Qining had already experienced Su Luo's wit and intelligence. He nodded his head in complete understanding of her meaning, and cleverly crossed his arms to stand at the side. The Crown Prince saw that Bei Qining stopped quarreling. Naturally, he also knew when to stop. He gave a severe snort. Want to compete, then let's compete. But, only this prince and you, the both of us will compete, others are not allowed to interfere. Saying this, his gaze swept from Bei Qinying's to Nangong Liuyuan's body. He loathed both these people, but couldn't help admitting that their strength was extraordinary. It was also because of their extraordinary strength that he loathed them even more. Su Luo faintly smiled, then, what are the rewards and penalties for this competition? The Crown Prince thought about it. Suddenly, his mouth hooked into a sneer. How about this? Just use the amount of amethyst thorn fish hooked to decide things. Whoever has more will win. As for the rewards and penalties, then the winning side will get the rewards. If the winning side hooks 10 amethyst thorn fish, then the losing side will compensate the winner with 10 pieces of green-colored crystal stones, and so on. 10 amethyst thorn fish will be compensated with 10 green-colored crystal stones. Su Luo's heart was simply too excited. This idiotic crown prince simply did not know that she had a cheating tool placed in the fish bait, and actually stupidly set down this rule. This time, wouldn't he be scared to death of the compensation? Only, Su Luo was afraid of revealing a clue. In a split second, her expression seemed somewhat hesitant. Nangong Luyun smiled in an easygoing manner and rubbed Su Luo's head. Mere green-colored crystal stones, this king can still afford to lose, go play without holding back. Implication being, if she lost, the penalty would be considered his to pay. Su Luo smilingly nodded her head towards him and again coldly humphed towards the crown prince. Fine. It's decided just like this, but words are not good enough proof, we must draw up a written contract. The crown prince was still afraid that Su Luo would renege on the debt, so both people agreed easily. He ordered a servant to fetch brush, ink and paper, then the paper was laid out on top of a large stone. Bei Chening, full of interest, acted as a witness. He then picked up the brush and started to write. At this moment, the writing done by the brush was like moving clouds and flowing water on top of the paper. The handwriting on the paper flowed smoothly and elegantly, delighting the eyes of the people watching. Chapter 356, Amethyst Thorned Island, 7. Bei Chening stopped the brush and self-satisfiedly lifted his chin. The written calligraphy is truly great. Simply want to collect it and don't let anyone see it. Su Luo was speechless. This child, as expected, was influenced by a different environment. He was the same as Nangong Luyun, with no limit to their narcissism. Altogether, Bei Chening wrote 3 copies, one was given to Su Luo, another was given to the crown prince. In addition, the final copy was held by him as the witness, so as to avoid someone reneging and not acknowledging the debt. After the 3 people signed their own names, the competition could begin. 3 hours is the limit. Whoever hooks the most amethyst thorned fish will be the winner. With a wave of Bei Chening's hand, the competition officially started. In order to maintain the fairness, equality and the openness of the competition, Su Luo and Nangong Liujue sat in the same place to fish. Everyone's fish bait was their own secret recipe mix. No one would inspect the other's fish bait. As long as it could hook an amethyst thorned fish, then it's enough. Therefore, Su Luo fished with a clear conscience. Now, not far away, Lan Xian was smiling and shaking his head. Oh dear, looks like this time, Nangong will bleed a huge amount. Lan Xian leisurely leaned back into his chair and switched to a more comfortable position and his voice held a sigh. That girl is also really too headstrong. Don't know how Nangong fell just for her. Anya Ming glared at him. If you don't want to wound the camaraderie among brothers, then don't speculate about her. Could it be that you couldn't tell that this time, Nangong is really serious? Lan Xian's expression was lethargic. He cast a glance at the spectacle in the distance and still crooned out a sentence, but I really can't see what characteristic that miss has that is fit to be with Nangong. You look at this matter she created. Anya Ming paused a little, looking towards the azure sky in the distance. He looked at it for a long time before pensively saying one sentence, you think this time she will lose? Isn't it obvious? Lan Xian spread out both hands, and as expected, said, Nangong Liujue, although he looks annoying, he does not lack strength. Don't forget that last year, the number of amethyst thorned fish he hooked was second only to Nangong. How could the Su family's girl compete with him? It is simply attempting the impossible and asking for trouble, okay? Also, Nangong is really too much, to actually still indulge her whim. Anya Ming smiled faintly, his tone was mild. No, this time, I'm afraid you may have guessed wrong. You believe that girl can win? Lan Xian cast a laughable glance at Anya Ming. I don't believe in her, but I do believe in Nangong. Anya Ming said vaguely, Nangong's vision is usually the most accurate from childhood to adulthood. Have you ever seen him lose? That is true, but this time, maybe he outsmarted himself and fell into a hidden ditch, right? No matter what, Lan Xian did not believe that Su Luo could win. Anya Ming only smiled indifferently and didn't say anything more, he merely focused on the fishing rod. What he didn't tell Lan Xian was that he always felt that that girl was not that simple. Moreover, she was very mysterious, and the specifics were hard to say. However, speaking of Su Luo's side, the matter of the bet got around, and as a result, a lot of people approached and settled around them to see the result. However, compared to Su Luo, everyone was optimistic about the Crown Prince winning. Not only was the Crown Prince's martial arts cultivation ranked much higher than Su Luo's, the number of amethyst-thorn fish that he had caught last year ought to speak for itself. His strength was out of the ordinary. This miss still doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, to actually dare to hammer on the table of the Crown Prince. This isn't considered much, the most interesting thing is their stake. How many amethyst-thorn fish the winning side hooks, the losing side must compensate that many green-colored crystal stones. Hey, I'm afraid this miss will bleed a huge amount. Which family is this miss from? Why is it that I have never seen her before? Have you heard of Su Manor's good-for-nothing waste? Have you heard about the buzzing rumors that were recently spread of a life-and-death duel between sisters? Chapter 357, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 8:0. It turns out that she is actually that renowned fourth Miss Su. No wonder, I heard she stole her older sister's fiancé, infuriating her sister so much that she set up a life-and-death duel on the spot. This also happened. Really can't see it from her clean and neat, pretty little appearance that she actually could do something this immoral. She would even steal her own older biological sister's fiancé. For some time, many people talked and whispered about topics ranging from the amethyst-thorned island to life-and-death battles. Su Luo's hearing had always been good, after being promoted to the third rank, it became even sharper, thus, every word that was said reached her ears. She actually didn't expect that within a short month's time, the public opinion would all become in favor of Su Qing. It made her reputation spotless and white as a lotus flower, also turning her into the victim, while she became the ruthless and vicious woman. Su Luo thought about it and couldn't help but feel that it was too funny. These rumors, if there wasn't someone secretly guiding it, she definitely would not believe it. As for who that person was, Su Luo only smiled and did not speak. Su Luo grabbed a small ball of fish bait, placed it on the fish hook, and cast her fishing line into the sea. After all, this was her first time fishing, thus, even with her intelligence, her movements had a few problems. Therefore, this became another area the people could criticize her on, finding fault with even the tiniest details. Tut! Can't even cast a fishing rod, how can she catch an amethyst-thorned fish? Does she think that the amethyst-thorned fish are the same as other kinds of fish? That's right, that ball of fish bait is way too big, how can she use so much? If the amethyst-thorned fish really bites it, then that would be strange. Just with this level of ability, and she still wants to compete with the Crown Prince? This is so embarrassing as to lose face all the way to her maternal grandmother's family. No need to predict the outcome of the competition. I can tell you now, His Highness the Crown Prince will definitely win. These bystanders watching the spectacle all forecasted and vowed that Su Luo would lose. The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose slightly, her attention focused on the surface of the sea. She completely ignored the nearby numerous disturbances. The Crown Prince had heard all the negative comments towards Su Luo. He calmly cast a glance at Su Luo and mockingly said, if you manage to hook even a single amethyst thorn fish, this prince will, before he could finish, suddenly, the mocking smile on the crown prince's face stiffened. Because, he saw that the fishing line on Su Luo's fishing rod was being dragged downwards. This was the sign that a fish had bitten the hook. Everybody nearby became excited. OMG, it took the bait, it took the bait. How is that possible? Wasn't this line only cast merely half a minute ago? How was it half a minute? It hasn't been less than 10 seconds, right? That being said, this luck is a little too good, right? Faced with these incoherent, excited voices, Su Luo merely smiled faintly. She carefully reeled in, then lifted the fishing rod for a closer look. On the fishing line was hooked a lively, jumping amethyst thorn fish. This amethyst thorn fish was much bigger compared to the one before. It was about 2 adult palms long, and there was a faint purple spirit power being emitted from its whole body. With just one look, you could tell that its age was not young. Not waiting for Su Luo to put it down, Bei Chening had already run up like a lackey, diligently helping Su Luo take the amethyst thorn fish's mouth off the hook, and happily giving Su Luo a thumbs up. Older brother's wife is so amazing, continue on with this persistence, and eliminate that fucker. Who are you calling a fucker? The crown prince was just feeling depressed, and again hearing Bei Chening chattering happily not far away annoyed him to death. He gave a heavy snort and sent a cold glare at Bei Chening. Whoever answered, that's who it refers to. The clever Bei Chening quickly avoided the trap in the crown prince's words. If Bei Chening had answered that the fucker mentioned was you, then that was just covertly admitting that Bei Chening, he himself, was the fucker. Chapter 358, Amethyst Thorned Island, 9. The crown prince set up this trap and believed from the bottom of his heart that Bei Chening would be taken in. This way, he could seize the opportunity to ridicule him instead of always being ridiculed by him. Unfortunately, Bei Chening wasn't fooled. The crown prince was infuriated to the point that the temple on his forehead started to pulse. He angrily and loudly shouted, "Get lost!" Bei Chening merely held the amethyst thorn fish and strutted around in front of the crown prince. What's the point of bickering? If you have the ability, let's use strength to talk. You should also hook a fish for me to take a look. Su Luo saw that these two were about to fight again, and somewhat helplessly placed her hand on her forehead and shook her head. She pinched off a small ball of fish bait and put it on top of the fish hook. Once again, she cast the fishing rod into the sea. On the other side, Bei Chening and the crown prince still hadn't finished arguing. The sounds of surprise once again arose from this side. Oh heavens! It moved again, the fishing rod moved again. This is impossible. How can it be like this? Isn't the amethyst thorn fish very difficult to catch? Don't tell me that this year's amethyst thorn fishes are especially dumb. Especially easy to angle for. You are especially dumb. Just now, it's not like you didn't fish for it, why did you become stupid? Obviously, the fishes are slipping away like a thief, so slippery that they won't stay in your hand. But that's not right. The fourth Miss Su clearly is hooking them very easily. Then, did you see the crown prince hook an amethyst thorn fish? Nangong Liujue immediately stopped quarreling and looked over at Su Luo. He only saw her effortlessly pull up the fishing rod and that another lively, frisky amethyst thorn fish was hooked to her fishing rod. He was simply gaping in shock, his entire person was flabbergasted. This is impossible. How could there be someone who could catch 2 amethyst thorn fishes within less than a minute? What did she take an amethyst thorn fish as? An ordinary kind of fish? That was a full of spirit power and intelligent amethyst thorn fish. Take him as an example, if he was able to hook one in 20 minutes, it was already considered extraordinarily great. But, this loathsome girl's luck was good to this extent. 2 fishes within 1 minute. 2 fishes. The crown prince was itching to yell out loud, "You are cheating," these 3 words. However, logic told him, why would it be cheating to catch amethyst-thorn fishes? No matter what methods you use, being able to hook one was considered good. Su Luo glanced faintly at the crown prince. In her eyes, appeared a smiling expression that didn't reach their depths. Does the crown prince not have a single fish yet? This is not normal, you must try harder. A sentence that was as light as a feather but was like a heavy fist, was ruthlessly thrown at the crown prince's face, knocking him dizzy. The crown prince's malicious gaze swept a glance at Su Luo and coldly said, "Don't celebrate too early, the outcome of this competition hasn't been determined. There will be a time for you to cry. Then just wait and see who is the person that will cry when the time comes." After Su Luo had placed the fish bait properly, she very casually tossed the fishing line into the ocean. Other people who wanted to hook an amethyst-thorn fish, every step of the process, they must be cautious, careful and concentrate on the task completely. They still had to throw all the spirit strength in their body onto the fishing line, always paying attention to whether the fish bait was bitten, afraid that if they were not careful, the precious amethyst-thorn fish would be gone. However, with Su Luo, whatever so-called professional techniques were non-existent. She just casually threw the fishing line, and afterwards, she would hold the fishing rod, waiting for the fish to take the bite, then hook it easily, just like that. It simply made those so-called professionals, who were proficient in various techniques, stare with their eyes wide open. In the beginning, everybody was using a tone of making fun of her to mock her that her way was not right, but Su Luo used reality to ruthlessly strike back at them. In less than a few seconds, Su Luo's fishing line once again sank a little. Now, all the people surrounding them were so excited that they had gone practically insane. Fish, fish, again it bit, heaven. Oh heavens. Oh. Chapter 359, Amethyst-Thorned Island 10. The surrounding spectators were nearly shocked into a daze by Su Luo's show of skill. How could this be? This was simply impossible, alright. Too unimaginable. In less than 2 minutes, there was actually someone who could continuously hook 3 amethyst-thorn fishes, and each were bigger than the last one. Yet clearly, they had also tried their hand at fishing before. All of them knew just how very, incredibly difficult it was to catch these amethyst-thorn fishes that were full of intelligence. At this moment, the crown prince was staring stupidly in a daze at Su Luo, entirely uncertain on how to react, except for the involuntary twitching of his cheek which betrayed how at a loss he felt. This, the crown prince pointed at the water surface in shock, asking Su Luo in a daze, just what kind of devilish method did you use? Su Luo calmly glanced at him, raised an eyebrow and smiled vaguely, devilish method? Crown Prince, should demonstrate it for us to see. Slandering people is wrong. Talking nonsense without evidence, others will say that the Crown Prince cannot afford to lose. You are such a loathsome girl. The Crown Prince's eyes became bloodshot, wishing he could swallow Su Luo alive and whole. This loathsome girl's words seemed like they were polished with poison. She was simply carved out of the same mold as Beichening. Loathsome girl, is insulting whom? Nangong Luyun nonchalantly swept a gaze at him, his pair of eyes were cold and threatening. He bore the dignity of an elite, powerful master from head to toe. The Crown Prince immediately felt as if he had fallen into an ice room, and stiffened all over, stammering speechlessly. Abominable. The Crown Prince clenched his fist by his side, hating the fact that despite having the same status as Nangong Luyun, he had always lost under that profoundly enigmatic gaze of his. Currently, the not-so-distant Anya Ming and Lan Xian had noticed the commotion over on this side. They couldn't help being somewhat curious, Lan Xian was even more so, and directly beckoned a servant over. What? Catching 3 amethyst-thorn fishes in under 2 minutes. How can that be possible? Lan Xian leapt to his feet. Due to being too excited, even the chair behind him had toppled over onto the ground. Anya Ming was also shocked to a standstill. Although because of Nangong Luyun, he had thought of Su Luo more favorably, but he had never expected that the girl's performance would actually go beyond expectations. This was simply unimaginable to the extreme. In this group of people, they could also be considered among the top, catching no more than 2 or 3 fishes under an hour. But that girl, Su Luo, actually accomplished an hour of their efforts in under 2 minutes. This was something only a 10th ranked or above expert could do. Right? Even if their father's generation were to undertake the task, they might also not be able to catch 3 amethyst-thorned fishes within 2 minutes. Could it be that hooking an amethyst-thorned fish was no longer related to a person's cultivation levels? Simply inconceivable. Go. Let's go see it for ourselves. I don't believe that girl can really do it. Lan Xian was deeply unconvinced, grabbing Anya Ming, and with a turn of his head, left. Anya Ming merely laughed bitterly as he shook his head. Under the gaze of the crowd, with so many eyes watching it happen just a short distance away from them, how could it be false? It was just that Anya Ming was also curious. He couldn't wrap his head around how that girl Su Luo could have done it. The crowd bustled about, every one of them was filled with excitement, and the pairs of eyes watching Su Luo fixedly, simply held all kinds of complex emotions. Shock, astonishment, envy, jealousy and hatred. Many kinds, but most of them were still envy, jealousy and hate. Su Luo indifferently swept her gaze around her surroundings. Just now, these people were still vowing that they predicted that the Crown Prince would win. She had merely hooked 3 fishes, and it was enough to make them this excited. Then, if she were to hook a few more, would it not drive them all mad? Chapter 360, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 11, Su Luo smiled faintly and deftly cast the fishing rod into the sea again. This time, almost everyone was eyeing Su Luo's fishing rod. The many pairs of eyes stared, as if wishing to bore a hole into the sea's surface. Under the scrutiny of many extremely excited gazes, both of Su Luo's hands remained as steady as a rock, without a single shred of stage fright from being observed closely by everyone at the scene. There's a bite. Su Luo was secretly delighted as she casually pulled, and it was another lively and flopping amethyst-thorned fish. The duration for this time, just as before, did not exceed half a minute. It seemed as if the amethyst-thorned fishes were already waiting beneath the sea, just waiting for Su Luo's fishing hook. The speed of capture simply could not be any faster. Seeing this scene, Anya Ming's expression flashed with a thread of surprise. Fast, it was simply too fast. Lan Xian's reaction was even more obvious. He stared at Su Luo in a daze, both eyes filled with disbelief, and him right now simply did not know how to react. Though he still did not believe the words of a bystander, but now he had witnessed with his own eyes Su Luo casting the fishing rod. In merely a blink of an eye, what she pulled up was an amethyst-thorned fish. It was basically as if countless amethyst-thorned fishes were trying to outdo each other, waiting to take the bait. This was simply as if those amethyst-thorned fishes were as obedient as domesticated animals reared in her home. This girl was simply too miraculous. Originally, Lan Xian still found Su Luo to be questionable. Now, he used an admiring, even a worshipful expression to stare at Su Luo. He was itching to lunge over and cling to her thigh, to beg and ask her how she had accomplished it. Following that, Su Luo once more pulled up an amethyst-thorned fish. Everyone present was seething, but they all remained silent. Everyone was gazing with worship at Su Luo, as if she was a goddess. They all held their breath with rapt attention, watching her every move very carefully. Su Luo felt goosebumps rise on her skin from those stares. She secretly guessed, was her own performance way too outstanding? Seeing Bai Qining about to move in, Lan Xian, who was a step faster, joyfully pounced forward and helped unhook the twisting amethyst-thorned fish which was struggling to escape. He gave Su Luo a silly smile as he took the chance to get closer to her. Sister-in-law, tell me, is there some mysterious secret to this fishing rod? It was not just Lan Xian who wanted to ask. Currently, everyone at the scene all wanted to question her. Consequently, following this question, everyone's gaze all concentrated onto Su Luo's face. Those pairs and pairs of eyeballs that were bright as snow, converged together. How astonishing the resulting effect was. Cough, cough. Su Luo lifted her fist to the side of her lips and coughed lightly, while in passing, she casually handed her fishing rod over to Lan Xian. Why don't you try it? The secret was in the fish food, but the fish food was handed to her at that time by Lan Xian. Therefore, Su Luo was very certain that Lan Xian's attention would definitely not be on the fish food. Lan Xian did not expect Su Luo to be so straightforward. He skeptically accepted the fishing rod, appraising it all over before again giving Su Luo a suspicious glance. Su Luo shrugged, "Isn't it you who don't believe my abilities to fish? Who felt that the secret was in the fishing rod? You take it, try it yourself and you will find out." Lan Xian was really obedient and took out the fish food he carried with him. He carefully added it to the fish hook and stealthily cast Su Luo a glance. He was unable to tell from her facial expressions, and thus thought it was suspicious. Afterwards, with single-minded devotion, he used the fishing rod, casting it towards the sea. Following Lan Xian's action, everyone's gaze fell sharply upon that floating, tiny fishing line. If it was truly capable of hooking the fish, then this fishing rod. Nearly everyone's gaze looked covertly at the fishing rod, desperately wanting to snatch the fishing rod immediately for their own. Because, if it was truly proven to be this fishing rod's doing, then, without a doubt, in an instant, it would become recognized as a godly device and become the target of every competing force in the world. Chapter 361, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 12. Su Luo leisurely and carefreely sat by Nangong Liuyun's side. She was contentedly nibbling slowly on snacks. Nangong Liuyun, while laughing, helped her wipe her hand, saying in a gentle voice, "You would even con Lan forth, you are indeed too bold." Lan Xian, ranked number 4 in his family's direct descendant of the younger generation. Normally, among close friends, he was accustomed to being called Lan Fourth. Lan Fourth, he had another nickname of lazy to death. This child usually was the laziest. If he could lie down, he absolutely would not sit. If he could sit down, he absolutely would not stand. If it was not for the unending amount of elixirs and medicinal pills, he might not have the level of martial arts cultivation he currently had. A streak of crafty smile flashed across the corner of Su Luo's mouth. Naturally, it was he himself who insisted on testing it. What does it have to do with me? Besides, before, although Lan Fourth was all smiles and had an affectionate manner towards her since the beginning, that pair of eyes had a judging and examining gaze. Su Luo was really fed up with it. Able to retaliate just a little to shock his superior attitude as the child of a super-influential aristocratic family, why not go for it? Nangong Liuyun's large, warm palm was placed on top of Su Luo's head. He indulgently and in a spoiling manner, kneaded her head. He then lifted an eyebrow and smiled, "You are not willing to eat even a little loss. However, this king simply loves to death this little temper of yours." The Nangong Liuyun standing in front of her had a face that was extremely handsome, as if naturally sculpted from brilliant jade. His facial features were picturesque, eyes like stars with a high and straight nose bridge. His moist lips were red as vermilion, setting off his alluring charm. Just one look could draw you in deeply and you'd never be able to shift your gaze away. Su Luo shifted her gaze away with great difficulty, turning her head away and disgruntledly said, "Hold your tongue. There are so many people here, talk less nonsense." Speaking nonsense. Nangong Liuyun's thick, jet-black, beautiful eyelashes, swept up slightly, and his phoenix eyes also looked up. They had a kind of mesmerizing all living things quality that was alluring and enticing. A light smile hooked up at the corner of his mouth, his scarlet lips were red as blood. "Good, good, then this king will tell it to you again in front of everyone's face. Come." Nangong Liuyun, while saying this, was about to pull Su Luo up, making everyone's gaze look over to where they were. Su Luo's heart immediately was anxious. In front of everyone, he was going to reveal his love for her. How outrageous. Currently, she was already the target of many. Okay. Su Luo hurriedly threw off his hand and said, full of an imposing manner, Nangong Luyun, you shut up now. If you dare say it, then I may just bury you. Bury this king. Nangong Luyun raised an eyebrow with interest. His pair of eyes narrowed with dangerous rays of light. His red lips hooked up, as enchanting and gorgeous as fire. Not good, she incited a disaster. Su Luo's heart was vexed, she shook off Nangong Luyun's hand and her body had already acted before her brain. At this moment, she had already leapt into the crowd like a burst of wind. In a flash, she disappeared from in front of Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun looked at that quick, nimble, leopard cat-like agility, and his pitch-black eyes were as deep as a lake. If his little Luoer was just a little more foolish, a little more stupid, a little less gifted, then he wouldn't have such a difficult time chasing after her. Lan Xian had already held that bamboo pole for about half an hour. Originally, he was full of expectations, now, his heart was disappointed and had given up all hope. Because he was able to perceive, when his fish hook was cast down, underwater, there was indeed a school of amethyst-thorned fish circling around. Yes, that's right, you guys did not hear wrong, there really was a school of amethyst-thorned fish enveloped in brilliant rays of purple. It formed a dense black mass, striving for first, afraid to be last, advancing waves upon waves in this manner. But, what was strange was that these amethyst-thorned fishes roamed and looped around the fishhook for a few circles. Afterwards, in 2s and 3s they wandered away, in a simply disdainful manner. Lan Xian now was so depressed that he was about to spit out blood. Clearly, it was the same fishing rod, the same fish food, why was it that when switched to him, it would be this kind of treatment? Chapter 362, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 13, Why was it that when Su Luo angled, they would vie for first and were afraid of being behind, but when it was his turn, they would all disdainfully fling their heads and swim away. This made him so depressed as to nearly spit out blood. He was hurt as deep as the Pacific Ocean. Sister-in-law, Lan Xian had a wanting to cry but lacking the tears expression as he gazed at Su Luo. His tearful, peach blossom eyes were brimming with rays of light, appealing for help. What? Su Luo exasperatedly answered. How could Lan Xian tell her, that beneath them, the school of amethyst-thorned fish that was assembled with great difficulty had all run away from his handling? Could he say he was avoided by a huge school of amethyst-thorned fish? He felt that this was really embarrassing, and he simply wanted to cover his face. Lan Xian's teary eyes were gleaming with unshed tears as he stuffed the fishing rod into Su Luo's hands. Sister-in-law, you come and do it. Under thousands of staring eyes, if he cast again, he would have lost all his dignity. Now, the expression he looked at Su Luo with was not judging, but rather looked hopeful and with starstruck eyes, full of adoration and worship. Su Luo's attitude towards him changed into one that showed satisfaction, and in passing, she took the offered fishing rod. She smiled faintly and said, I've come, so I'll do it. Each and every second now is a green-colored crystal stone, can't afford to waste it. Once Su Luo said these words, the crown prince's complexion immediately blackened. Wasn't what Su Luo said implying that the more amethyst-thorned fish she caught, the more tragic his loss would be? If like before, the crown prince would still haughtily lift his pronounced high-arcing chin bone, then give a cold humph and say that wasn't it merely a few pieces of green-colored crystal stones? How could this prince not be able to afford it? But, with the increased knowledge of Su Luo's speed in hooking an amethyst-thorned fish in a few seconds, how could the crown prince still have that kind of confidence? The him right now was so frightened by Su Luo until he nearly cried. This was what kind of goddamn speed? Following this, if her angling speed was all at a few seconds per fish, then even if you sold his entire fortune, it was not enough to compensate her. The more the crown prince thought, the more afraid he became. His heart was extremely panicked. Now, he was regretting it until his intestines were green. He wished he could give himself a few huge slaps. If it weren't for him insisting on going over to provoke Su Luo, wanting to go look down upon her angling speed, how could there be these matters that occurred afterwards? It truly was shooting himself in the foot and not being able to live anymore. Not mentioning the Crown Prince's intense and unstable state of mind, and solely speaking of Su Luo's side. It seemed she had really made a firm resolution to have the Crown Prince lose everything. In the moment it took for her to cast her fish hook into the sea, those amethyst thorn fishes that had avoided Lan Xian and left, once again encircled that thin strand of fish line. They were outdoing one another to peck at that round fish bait, owing to the rush for it. It was too fierce to the extent that when Su Luo pulled up, goddamn. Some people were so excited that they started to curse on the spot. This was too freakishly unimaginable. This time, it wasn't one fish, also wasn't two fishes, that very small fish hook actually had 3 fishes, 3 amethyst thorn fishes. This was simply the biggest miracle since the beginning of history, an unprecedented marvel. Who fucking said that hooking an amethyst thorn fish was harder than ascending to the sky? Who fucking said that amethyst thorn fish were very nimble? Who fucking said that an average of 1 fish in 10 minutes was already at the level of gods? Take a look at her, 1 fish in a few seconds, 1 fish hook could actually catch 3 amethyst thorn fishes. Moreover, each fish was not that small, and at one glance, you could tell that the fish were the bravest or strongest among the school of amethyst thorn fishes. The mass of people standing in a circle watching this scene were exceedingly envious. Their pair of eyes were bloodshot, itching to rush up and take these 3 amethyst-thorned fishes for themselves. They wished they could immediately be reborn as Su Luo, just fling a fishing line and would catch a string of amethyst-thorned fishes. This would simply be too fucking pleasurable, don't you think? Even looting couldn't be this fast. 1 amethyst-thorned fish was equal to 1 green-colored crystal stone. It was just like a living treasure for cultivators and practitioners. Now, the Crown Prince's complexion was exceptionally ugly, so gloomy and overcast that you could squeeze out droplets of water. Chapter 363, Amethyst Thorned Island, 14, Su Luo's gaze swept past him. Seeing him about to lose his cool, she sent him an even more taunting sentence. All at once, the Crown Prince will give 3 green-colored crystal stones. This will make the Crown Prince spend some money. I'm truly sorry about this. A mouthful of blood was stuck in the Crown Prince's throat. Spit, couldn't spit it out. Swallow, couldn't swallow it down. It was really choking him until his complexion was ashen, both of his eyes were scarlet red, and his hands were trembling. Bei Qining had always had complete rapport with Su Luo, a flawless partnership. Seeing this, he happily added another knife stab. Sister-in-law, you need not be anxious on the Crown Prince's behalf. Within his magnificent palace far from here, there are many treasures. He's not afraid of being unable to afford to lose. In the worst-case scenario, we could just carry everything away, including that magnificent palace of his. The stuff in the magnificent palace had taken the Crown Prince more than 10 years to collect. Inside were countless number of treasures that would simply shock people. The Crown Prince's pair of scarlet red eyes glared at Bei Qining, wishing he could throw himself on him and choke his neck. This busybody, even if he didn't speak, nobody would think he was mute. Su Luo nodded her head in approval. Oh, this time, I feel reassured. Otherwise, I was afraid that the Crown Prince could not afford to lose this amount, so much so that I didn't dare to let go and fish with my all. Sister-in-law, you are simply too kind-hearted, too admirable, too charitable. Bei Qining made a big fuss over the littlest things, then exaggeratedly gestured and danced for joy. Finally, he again kind-heartedly consoled, but you really ought to let go and have free rein to fish, otherwise, the Crown Prince will question the fairness of the competition. The Crown Prince was almost about to vomit blood. If that loathsome girl uninhibitedly fished, why wouldn't he question the fairness of this competition? The crown prince was almost about to howl out this sentence. If that loathsome girl let go and fish, his magnificent palace would not enough to pay for the loss. Su Luo cast a glance at the face of the crown prince that was about to pass out. Her face was full of surprise and said, "Eh. So it seems good intentions still did bad things. Looks like I really need to feel relieved and boldly fish. Otherwise, the crown prince is certain to be unhappy." Lan Xian, who was at the side, when he heard their unself-conscious dialogue, he was practically speechless. Afterwards, Lan Xian and Anya Ming exchanged a glance, both of their eyes had a forced smiling expression, and they sighed helplessly in unison. Who said that now? The only person at a loss was the crown prince himself. Both of them were also very regretful, all right. Now, the both of them, without exception, wanted to complain against Nangong's strategic methods. This busybody for sure had already known that Su Luo had this ability earlier, so in the beginning, Nangong just one-upped them in a match. He manufactured a kind of "she doesn't know how to hook an amethyst thorn fish" facade, making them lower their guards and feel too embarrassed to ask for a single amethyst thorn fish that she, a little miss, would catch. As a result, they both made a solemn vow to decline her catch. Now, when they saw Su Luo pulling the fishes up one by one, they were also very envious watching this, okay? They almost wished that time would flow backwards and return to that time when they were on the boat, so they could rightfully and boldly request Su Luo to also hand over her amethyst-thorned fish catches. Bei Chening smiling happily, bumping Lan Xian's arm once, "Hey, didn't expect that sister-in-law would be this awesome, right? Now, regretting until your intestines are green, right? Shut up." Lan Xian hatefully glared at Bei Chening, arrogantly and with frailty. He turned his face away, but facing the wind was the same, as two broad lines of tears appeared. So many amethyst-thorned fishes, originally, it should be divided evenly between him and little Ming. A blunder, a giant blunder, all conned away by Nangong, that big cheat. Really, just thinking about it made him have a heartache. Lan Xian exaggeratedly covered the place over his heart and cast a faintly blaming glance at Nangong Luyun. Who knew that this guy was not even a little bit sympathetic? Instead, he returned a glance that was full of an imposing manner, indifferently saying, "What? What? What other could be there? Admiration, envy, regret, hate, etc." These words were easy to say, but they didn't sound good. Lan Xian could only wretchedly, silently and secretly be bitter as he once again turned his head away. Chapter 364, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 15. Since the beginning, Su Luo had already calculated everything well. This time she must swindle the crown prince fully and well. So, she never had any intent to hold back. Following the passage of time, one after another, the amethyst-thorned fishes were hooked by Su Luo. Sometimes, one hook had 2 fishes, and other times, it had 3. Moreover, every time the bait was taken, it would absolutely not exceed 10 seconds. It was almost like, once the fish hook was cast, it would always be like pulling up a string of fish. This scene simply made all the surrounding people extremely stimulated. A lot of the people covered their chest, unable to stop shaking their head, expressing that they had been overly shocked. The crown prince saw Su Luo's unbroken succession of casting down a hook to pull up a fish, and the muscles on his face continuously twitched and trembled. He was completely unable to suppress it. His pair of eyes were both rigidly watching Su Luo, staring fixedly, from his former astonishment, shock, and disbelief, to now fury, regret and about to lose his head because of fear. The majestic, stately crown prince, who seldom ever lost his head from fear, bestowed this honor on Su Luo. How could he not be alarmed? This was one amethyst-thorned fish, which was one piece of green-colored crystal stone. The market price for one piece of green-colored crystal stone started at 5,000 gold coins. However, you must often raise the price to 10,000 gold coins before being able to buy one. If she was just catching them one by one, then it was still unlikely to frighten the crown prince to this degree. The problem was that each time, Su Luo was pulling up strings of fishes. This simply was totally absurd. The crown prince heavily slapped down on the back of the chair. The nice, sturdy chair was instantly turned into dust. The large noise created by the crown prince immediately attracted the attention of a lot of people. Alas, the pitiful crown prince, this time, I'm afraid he will lose all the way to his maternal grandmother's family. Oh dear, who would have imagined that this miss from the Su family would be this amazing? These amethyst-thorned fish seem as if they were reared in her home. They say, it is still the crown prince who first went over to provoke her, right? Oh, that's true. If it isn't the crown prince himself going over to provoke her, why would she compete with him on this? What is this called? This is called to sin against heaven is permitted, but to sin against oneself, one cannot live. Hush, not so loud, don't you see that the crown prince's face is already green? Careful not to let him spill his fury over onto our bodies. Momentarily, everyone's tongues were wagging. Originally, in the beginning, practically everyone had predicted that Su Luo would be the one to suffer a crushing defeat. But now, under Su Luo's accepted bullying strength, since then, the wind of that public opinion blew simply in the reverse direction. All the unfavorable rumors blew towards the crown prince. The crown prince was already infuriated to the extreme, then to hear these rumors blowing in the wind, he was almost nearly driven mad. His gloomy face, with a very fierce malicious gaze, swept a circle in front of his eyes. Places that were watched at by his gaze, everybody was unable to speak and frightened, lowered their heads. They were afraid that if they were not careful, they could accidentally bump into the muzzle of a gun. Su Luo saw the crown prince's panicked expression, and she became even more enthusiastic when fishing. Now, that little wooden bucket of hers was already replaced with a super large wooden barrel since a long time ago. Su Luo measured the super large wooden barrel with a glance, frowned slightly and again looked at Beichening. Looks like this wooden barrel also won't fit anymore, right? The smiling expression on Beichen Ying's clean face was exceedingly brilliant. Seeing this, he vigorously nodded as if taking credit for something, and he happily smiled. Sister-in-law, look, what is that? Su Luo followed along his gaze and looked, and saw that from their own luxurious yacht, a row of sailors came down. Every two of them formed a team, every team was carrying a super large wooden barrel. She gauged that those barrels were sufficient to hold a volume about the size of 2 adults. Su Luo roughly counted, and found that there were about 10 of them. For a moment, she was truly somewhat speechless. The crown prince saw that row of wooden barrels, and the muscles on his face twitched and trembled even more violently. Chapter 365, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 16. Beichening had always fought with the crown prince and won equal share of his limelight. He had never stood on the overwhelming side of victory like today. Everything here was all credited to Su Luo. Therefore, his feeling of adoration for Su Luo sprang up unbidden. Thanks to this, Lan Xian and Beichening fought over who unhooked the fishes. Therefore, in order to raise efficiency, Su Luo arranged it as followed, making her fishing flow like the course of a stream of running water. Lan Xian baited the hook. Su Luo cast the fishing rod and reeled in the fishing line. Beichening, meanwhile, unhooked the fish, coming like a running stream of water and immediately promoting the efficiency to its peak. Often, within less than 10 seconds, they could smoothly catch a wave of fish. The crown prince expressed his objections, but his objections were very quickly overruled. The mass of people standing around watching were already dumbfounded by this scene, while more and more people came to watch. Some people basically had no inclination to fish themselves. Some smart people also came over with a fishing rod to squeeze for a position to fish, thinking that a little of Su Luo's good luck would rub off on them too. However, these people did not know, exactly because of having Su Luo's fish food as contrast, their fish food were even more disdained by the fishes, and so they were even more unable to hook a fish. This was called being too smart for their own good. 1 hour had passed. 2 hours had passed. 2.5 hours had passed. Bei Qining looked at the time, and in the last second, yelled, "Time's up!" As a result, both sides laid down their fishing rods and allowed the referee to examine the result. This examination of the results was really entirely focused on inspecting Su Luo's catch, because the Crown Prince didn't hook even a single fish. The root cause being, 1. His mood was unstable, 2. He had given up from despair, and the most important third reason, was that with Su Luo's fish food as contrast, it was therefore even more impossible for the Crown Prince to hook a fish. All the amethyst thorn fishes went over and were circling around Su Luo's fish hook. Therefore, this time, his success was the most rotten since the beginning of history, harvesting 0 fish. That's right, the majestic and stately Crown Prince unexpectedly didn't even catch one amethyst thorn fish. This was simply the greatest blow to him under the heavens. Maybe the Crown Prince also felt that it was quite disgraceful, from beginning to end. His face was black, his face was paralyzed in an expression of wishing he could execute everyone using death by 1,000 cuts. Come, now we will count how many amethyst-thorned fish Miss Su hooked. Haha, everyone is looking forward to it, full of curiosity. Everyone really wants to know how many fishes are great, benevolent, bursting with good luck Miss Su hooked in the end, right? Bei Qining, in the role of referee, didn't have even a little of a referee's awareness. Once his thoroughly disparaging and provocative words fell, everyone's zeal and enthusiasm was all mobilized, making everyone completely overlook the Crown Prince. Bei Qining, Lan Xian and Anya Ming, these three originally aloof, distinguished young masters and descendants of aristocratic families, had now been transformed into little brother-like servants. They were all over there, helping Su Luo count the fishes. After checking the numbers, Lan Xian and Anya Ming exchanged a glance. Both of them had their hands over their chest, with bitterly grieving expressions of being repeatedly regretful. Afterwards, they both looked towards Su Luo wretchedly, looking at those little sad expressions, it really made a person want to take pity on them. However, after experiencing Nangong Liuyan's honey traps, this trick was already entirely useless on Su Luo. Bei Qining very smugly cast a glance at the Crown Prince, happily and smilingly saying, "Nangong Liujue, do you want to know how many green-colored crystal stones you lost?" The Crown Prince's complexion right now could be described as deathly pale. His hands hidden in his sleeves trembled non-stop, making even the sleeves shake slightly. As a nation's Crown Prince, this kind of essential quality of the heart was really unacceptable. Bei Qining appreciatively stretched out the Crown Prince's panicked expression, only then did he slowly give a sigh and very kind-heartedly told him. Chapter 366, Amethyst Thorned Island, 17, Bei Qining laughed loudly. According to the recently checked numbers, Nangong Liujue, that's 1,500 heavenly amethyst-thorned fishes ah. That is to say, you owe 1,500 green-colored crystal stones, ah. Bei Qining tucked his hands at his waist and laughed wildly on the spot, simply too pleased with the result that he couldn't handle it. Yet, the Crown Prince's face turned green in a split second, his figure swayed, nearly unable to stand steadily on his feet. It was not only the Crown Prince, at this moment, the people that were there watching all sucked in a huge breath of air, practically on the verge of fainting. 1,500 amethyst-thorned fish. 1,500 pieces of green-colored crystal stones. The Crown Prince had truly lost miserably ah. Not to mention the Crown Prince, even the whole Eastern Ling capital might not be able to pool together that much within such a short time, right? Everyone was anxiously gazing at the Crown Prince, inquisitively sizing him up, not knowing what he would do. When Bei Qining saw the Crown Prince's black face that was like the bottom of a pot, he walked over and patted him on the shoulder, very kindly consoling him, "Isn't it just 1,500 green-colored crystal stones? For you, that's a very simple matter, isn't it? Simple your ass." The Crown Prince gave Bei Qining an indignant and harsh glare. If it was 150 green-colored crystal stones, he would still be able to sell things and pool it together, and more or less be able to scrape together enough. But 1,500 pieces, they might as well just kill him directly. The Crown Prince flung back his head, and directly spouted out one phrase, "Don't have it." Beichening laughed more craftily than even a fox. "So many people are staring intently at you, Nangong Liujue, you really have the nerve to renege on the debts. A crown prince that doesn't have any credibility worth talking about is not a good crown prince. In the future, this will become your biggest obstacle to ascending the imperial throne. Our Beichen family will be unlikely to consent to you occupying the top seat. You, the crown prince, glared furiously at Beichening. Would this person die if he didn't oppose him? Would he die? Our Lan family also will not consent. Lan Xian used one hand to lean on Beichen Ying's shoulder, guffawing while gazing at the crown prince. The Anya family will also not approve. Anya Ming, with a smile that was yet not a smile, raised his eyebrow, and gazed at the crown prince with interest. You all, the crown prince had not thought that these people would actually stick their head out for a no-name loathsome girl, and the rage in his heart became even more rigorous. Actually, what he was most furious about was if at that time he had not withdrawn from the engagement, that loathsome girl would be an object in his possession. Then today, this great number of amethyst-thorned fish would be his, all his. Now, he wouldn't be in this situation of being pressed for the repayment of debts and practically put on the spot, rather, he would be in reaping it in during this harvest season. So long as he thought of this, a stabbing pain would throb unceasingly in the crown prince's heart, hurting so much that he nearly could not breathe. Finally, the crown prince gave a hateful glare at Su Luo, and yelled at Beichening, "Even if you want your payment, it shouldn't be right now, this prince doesn't carry that many green-colored crystal stones on me." Beichening nonchalantly waved his hand, "Not a problem, wait until after returning, we will naturally come to find you to pay it back. If you still won't recompense in full at that time, naturally, we will then go call upon your father to demand repayment." Seconded. Lan Xian happily said while raising his eyebrow. Seconded +1. Anya Ming also, while smiling splendidly, watched the crown prince. These people, abominable. Simply too abominable. The crown prince angrily flung his sleeves, and grandiosely led a group of people away. Beichening consoled Su Luo, saying, "Sister-in-law, don't be afraid. This debt, naturally we will get it back for you on your behalf. This time, if we don't make Nangong Liujue bankrupt, then my last name is not Beichen." Su Luo smilingly nodded her head, "Then that's really great, if it was me, I wouldn't be able to get this debt back." Beichening adoringly looked at Su Luo. "In the end, sister-in-law is still the most capable one. I've been contending with him for so many years, yet this is the first time I've seen him lose this badly, this depressingly. I'm truly happy to death." Chapter 367, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 18, Su Luo smiled and instructed people to carry all the amethyst-thorned fish onto the luxurious yacht. The sky darkened but was not completely black. The line of sight was unclear and hazy from the rising moon. Suddenly, a person among the group of people cried out in alarm, "Look, what is that?" Everyone's gaze turned to look in that direction. One could only see a white shadow appearing on the sea surface. It seemed really close, but at the same time really far away. It was rocking and flickering, and couldn't be seen very clearly. However, Nangong Liuyan's phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, a trace of surprise appearing in his eyes. When his gaze turned and landed on Su Luo, a smiling expression was at the corner of his mouth. This girl's luck, maybe she really was the illegitimate daughter of the goddess of fortune. Even this kind of rarely seen, once every 100 years fortuitous meeting, was encountered by her. Really didn't know what he ought to say. That is. Beichen Ying's eyes flashed as if simply in disbelief. He turned his gaze towards Nangong Liuyan, as if wishing he could confirm something. So arcane. Lan Xian had an extremely astonished expression on his face. He was so excited that he was immediately about to burst out with obscene language. Both of his hands were even tightly clenched into fists, so excited that he almost couldn't control himself. Inconceivable. Too inconceivable. Anya Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. He gazed deeply at the white shadow that suddenly appeared in the distance. He repeatedly shook his head and sighed. Su Luo somewhat doubtfully swept these three a glance. What was going on? Why were each and every one of them looking at that white shadow on the sea surface with expressions of longing, aspiration and hope? Their eyes also had a tint of seeing something mystical. Could it be related to some inside information that she didn't know? Go board the yacht. Nangong Luyun raised his sleeves and very naturally led Su Luo along. He brought a group of people and grandiosely walked towards the yacht. Not limited to Nangong Luyun's group of people, almost all the people present had discovered the peculiar thing on the sea surface. Those smart people had already boarded their yacht earlier and sailed towards that white shadow with flying speed. Along the way, there were constant yells from people, with heart-tearing, lung-splitting, screaming voices shouting out something called Amethyst Fish Palace. Amethyst Fish Palace? What kind of thing was it? After returning to the yacht, Su Luo asked this question like a very curious baby. However, just after she asked, she was collectively looked down on by everyone. Bei Qining was simply helplessly at a loss with her sister-in-law. Did you live in a vacuum for the 10 or so years before? You actually don't even know about the Amethyst Fish Palace? Lan Xian meticulously and carefully looked Su Luo up and down, holding his chin and pondering with a harboring evil design's expression as he leaned close to her, sister-in-law, 100 amethyst thorned fish in exchange for the answer, deal. I order you to go away. Bei Qining directly lifted away Lan Xian who was trying to take advantage to loot her. You, Lan fourth old man's, mouth is really expensive. A matter that takes merely a sentence and your asking price is actually 100 amethyst thorned fish. Sure enough, Bei Qining was a good child. Su Luo waited for him to clear up her confusion. Unexpectedly, once Bei Qining cast Lan Xian aside, he himself leaned in close to Su Luo and while smiling happily, said, Sister-in-law, I'll give you a 20% discount. I'll only take 80 amethyst thorned fish. The corner of Su Luo's mouth twitched, she held her forehead and looked towards the sky. This group of foolishly cute people. Su Luo immediately gazed towards Nangong Luyun. Bei Qining was just about to console Su Luo with that Nangong Luyun would never say these superfluous words. But Nangong Luyun only pulled Su Luo by the hand and helped her sit down properly, full of interest in fiddling with her slim fingers, then softly told her, Amethyst Fish Palace is related to the amethyst thorned fish. Almost every 100 years, it would appear once, therefore drawing out all the experts from all directions who would fall over each other in their eagerness to come. Also, every time, it's practically a bloodbath. Nangong Luyun really suspected that this time, the appearance of the Amethyst Fish Palace might have something to do with Su Luo catching large quantities of amethyst thorned fish. A bloodbath? Su Luo blinked her eyes with some misgivings. Nangong Luyun rubbed her head, a heavy and imposing manner flashed across his expression. Chapter 369, Jade Lake's Fairy, 1. She was unlike other aristocratic families' women that would immediately show her haughtiness on the surface. The Jade Lake's Fairy cast an indifferent gaze at Su Luo, a pure, shallow, smiling expression appeared on her face. Miss Su is also here. Su Luo smiled. Yes, what a coincidence. The two people finished greeting each other in a manner that was neither warm nor cold, and didn't speak again. At this moment, from behind the Jade Lake's fairy body, walked out a man. One could see him stand with his head held high and upright. His body was tall, straight and slender, appearing impressive with a loftiness that was out of the ordinary. Especially that pair of eyes, extremely sharp like a hawk, glittering like frost and snow. They had a grandeur that intimidated others and overwhelmed people. He swept his eyes over the surroundings once with a sharp, hawk-like gaze that completely ignored Su Luo. Apparently, in his eyes, Su Luo was merely an unnecessary existence, as insignificant as an ant that he could single-handedly crush to death. Oh, Li Aofeng, what wind managed to blow such a great holy Buddha like you here? Bei Qining folded his arms over his chest and cast a glance at him with a ghost of a smile. Li Aotian, as the name implied, his haughtiness soared to the skies, his conduct and bearing were very proud and aloof. This person would boast in that the social circle of aristocratic families, his talent was unsurpassed. Normally, he was arrogant and seemed aloof from politics and material pursuits. Beichen Palace and Jade Lake Palace were opponents from afar that often competed. The two palaces' relationship was always complicated, therefore, Bei Qining was always rude towards Li Aotian. Li Aotian indifferently shot a glance at Bei Qining and gave an icily arrogant snort. With regards to Bei Qining, who was at the same level as him, he was still unworthy of his attention. Li Yaoyao gave Bei Qining an apologetic smile. My second elder brother's temperament is usually like this, you should also know this, by all means, don't take offense. The corner of Bei Qinying's mouth lifted into an arc and he absent-mindedly said, Younger sister Yao Yao is apologizing, as the older brother, I naturally have nothing to say. Come, sit down so we can talk. In this play, he was merely a warm body to use as placeholder, the real lead still needed to be handed over to Nangong, and watch how he was about to act out this play well. In Bei Qinying's eyes shone a burning radiance, his pair of peach blossom eyes were full of a gossiping overtone. Li Yaoyao very naturally sat down at Nangong's left side. Quite familiarly, she coiled around Nangong's arm full of smiles, her smile showing off shallow dimples. She subtly said in a low voice, Today, third senior brother is here to catch amethyst thorn fish, you must have won an overwhelming victory. Su Luo's gaze dwelled on the Jade Lake Fairy coiling around Nangong Liuyan's arm, that very familiar manner, as if the two of them were frequently like this. Somewhat like a male-female pair being protected and whatnot, as if they were not affected by the world. Nangong's gaze was demonically charming, he raised an eyebrow and smiled. Then, he shook his head enigmatically but did not say a word. Su Luo noticed that Nangong Luyun hadn't resisted Jade Lake Fairy's intimacy and he also didn't push her away, she who was coiled around his arm, indulging in closeness. The two people spoke, acting as if nobody else was present. Their voices were so low as if sharing a secret between them, with a manner that was so close that nothing could come between them. The man was handsome beyond compare, the woman was exceedingly refined. With one glance, it could be seen that they were a pair of jade annulus, a couple that was a match made in heaven. The scenario appeared to be framed by a screen, isolating those two people in their own world, while others all became the landscape that set them off beautifully. Su Luo withdrew her hand quietly from Nangong's large palm, but this time, Nangong Luyun didn't insist, to the extent that Su Luo was easily able to withdraw her hands. Seeing their intimate manner that left no space for others to squeeze in, seeing Nangong Liuyun's intoxicating eyes pampering and spoiling, gentle feelings for her. A bitter smile emerged in Su Luo's heart. Her gaze turned away towards the ocean in the distance with its surging momentum. 1. This was either a typo by the author for Li Aotian's name or Bei Qining was being sarcastic and changed the tian, sky, to feng, wind, in Li Aotian's name to go with what he was saying. Chapter 370, Jade Lake's Fairy, 2, Nangong Luyun, Bei Qining said you seldom open your heart and treat someone well, did you know I believed it? A little bit, just short by a little bit, I would have started to like you. Short by just a little bit. As expected, the safest way was to strictly guard one's own heart. She must not lightly hand over her heart. Su Luo, Su Luo, have you forgotten the painful lesson from the previous life? Now, you still want to follow the path to disaster. Fancy that you still call yourself someone who had lived 2 lifetimes, you actually couldn't even see this reason clearly. A self-deprecating bitter smile played across Su Luo's face, a lonely and pained look flashed through her eyes. Bei Qining noticed that although Su Luo's face was unaffected, yet her tranquil, deep eyes were like condensed frost. His heart felt somewhat apologetic, and giving a clear cough, interrupted the two people's intimate heated chat. Yao Yao younger sister, you guys also appearing is too coincidental, right? We only just discovered the Amethyst Fish Palace and you guys just happened to come over? Jade Lake Fairy paused, her smile was shallow and pure, mysterious and charming. Venerable grandfather predicted that there was unusual movement on the East Sea and calculating the time, figured it was extremely possible for the Amethyst Fish Palace to appear. As a result, we came. A simple short piece of dialogue broke off that vague, charmingly and gentle atmosphere from a moment ago. The orders of grandfather shows he is truly quick-witted and clever, worthy of being called Jade Lake Palace's sea stabilizing divine needle, a position no one is able to shake. Bei Qinying's smile was not quite a smile. The Jade Lake Fairy smilingly started to chat with Bei Qining. Oh, that's right, you guys came to fish for amethyst thorn fish, right? Did you hook some? Let's roast some fish to eat, what do you say? Lan Xian cast a quick glance at the Jade Lake's Fairy. Bei Qian's buttock was beaten to pieces by his old man, so he remembers his lessons. Where would he still find the courage to eat it? The Jade Lake's Fairy appeared to have recalled something, then covered her vermilion lips and was consumed by laughter. This emotion and this scenery, Su Luo's eyes slightly narrowed, it gave her an illusion of being outside looking in. With just that one topic, the Jade Lake Fairy was able to lead them to their youthful years. This kind of being excluded feeling that was saying all of us are childhood friends that played and grew up together with everything being understood among us, whereas you are merely an outsider who shouldn't even think of coming in as an interloper. This made Su Luo feel somewhat uncomfortable. Lan Xian saw Su Luo's expression was dim, and he smilingly approached her. Sister-in-law, you still haven't heard of this awkward incident of Bei Qian's, right? Come, 100 amethyst thorn fish. Lan Xian had not yet finished speaking, before the Jade Lake's Fairy cut in first. She protested coquettishly and slanted a glance at Lan Xian. What nonsense are you saying? You haven't even looked to see if Miss Su could even hook 100 amethyst thorn fish first. Even one fish is unlikely, okay? And you still ask for so much like a lion with its mouth open wide. Only after she finished, did she become aware that she might have said too much. So, she smiled towards Su Luo. Miss Su, don't take any offense, I was merely stating the truth, there wasn't any intent to look down on you. If she didn't say anything, then it was not that bad. Once it was said, it seemed even more like she was trying to cover it up but was just making it worse. If it was to be said that the Jade Lake's Fairy was merely inserting a sharp knife a moment ago, then the sentence just now was like pulling that knife out, and at exactly the same place, she stabbed the knife in deeply once again. At this moment, Bei Qining, Lan Xian and Anya Ming, all three of their complexions were slightly strange. Bei Qining gave an even clearer cough, and tilted his head away. He really couldn't steel himself to the task of telling this story in order to strike a blow at Li Yaoyao. Su Luo smiled lightly, expressing that she didn't care, and then nodded towards Lan Xian. You speak. This showed she agreed to this business transaction. In any case, Su Luo girl was rich and imposing, it was merely 100 amethyst thorn fish and nothing more. In front of her type of rich, conspicuous spender, what did a mere 100 amethyst thorn fish count as? If he was to take a little, she still would have a fortune left. Lan Xian's heart was immediately jubilant, and he shifted towards Su Luo's current position. 1. Sea stabilizing divine needle, the backbone or pillar that held the family up. Chapter 371, Jade Lake's Fairy, 3. Thus, Lan Xian sold Bei Qinying's awkward incident without any hesitation nor guilt. One could only see him covering his stomach and laughing heartily for quite a while. Finally, he slowly began to speak. Sister-in-law, you may not know, at that time, we were still kids. Bei Qian family was celebrating his father's birthday, and we all followed our elders and went to Bei Qian Palace. That year, there were people gifting amethyst thorn fish to congratulate him, and indeed, that amethyst thorn fish's size was truly huge. That fish was about several hundred years old, and it was almost going to become a mystical spirit. At that time, Beichen's old man was extremely happy and was saving it in preparation for other important uses. But several of us, being underaged and ignorant, stole that amethyst thorn fish, ran behind the mountain, and roasted it. Explaining up to here, Lan Xian paused, as if the things that happened afterwards were too funny. And again, he covered his stomach and started to laugh uproariously with ow, ow, ow sounds. Anya Ming couldn't stand it any longer. Are you still going to tell it or not? If you won't tell it, then I will. It just so happened that he could split that 100 amethyst thorn fishes in half. Lan Xian, with one hand, pushed Anya Ming aside and seized the opportunity to sit by Su Luo's side. Smiling, he continued to explain it to her. Afterwards, this matter, we naturally were unable to conceal it. After Beichen Ying's old man found out, he was infuriated half to death. Beichen Ying's elder uncle was even more straightforward. He dangled little Shadow, one, back home and was going to beat him with a wooden plank. At that time, the few of us were extremely scared. In the end, it was Nangong who came up with a plan. Can you guess what method he came up with? Beat with a wooden plank? But with Nangong there to come up with a plan, very likely, this scene of Beichen Ying undergoing corporal punishment, Beichen Ying would not be eating a loss. Su Luo smiled while shaking her head. Lan Xian had a worshipful expression as he said, for sure, you would not have imagined it. Back then, nobody knows where Nangong stole a fresh piece of meat from the magical beast iron-armed ape. He stuck it firmly to the back of Beichen's butt. Consequently, when Beichen's elder uncle struck down with the plank, immediately, Beichen's little butt was saturated with bloodstains. It was a carnage with blood and flesh flying. Right away, it frightened Beichen's elder uncle until his face was green. Ha 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 ha. She didn't expect that the current them, where each and every one of them were full of noble aura, would be this naughty in their childhood. Su Luo seemed very interested and asked, and afterwards? Afterwards, Beichen's grandmother's heart was so distressed and regretful that she almost swooned. Completely disregarding the full house of guests, she immediately lifted her walking stick and chased after Beichen's elder uncle around the courtyard while hitting him with her walking stick. Beichen's old man was not careful and was also hit a few times. Ha 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 ha. Recalling this awkward incident at that time, Lan Xian held his stomach, laughing until he almost started to roll around on the ground. Having gone through Lan Xian's period of impromptu comical material, the stiff atmosphere eased up somewhat. Su Luo couldn't help but have a little more of a favorable impression of this lively Lan Xian. She felt that he was a good kid and decided to gift him a few more amethyst thorned fishes for free. The Jade Lake's fairy naturally knew this entertaining story more clearly than Su Luo. What she noticed was not this story per se, rather, how Lan Xian addressed Su Luo. Lan Xian inadvertently said, sister-in-law, perhaps, he didn't even remember it himself. However, the sensitive Jade Lake's fairy, how could she not have heard? The hand she concealed in her sleeves tightened some more, then her face burst open into a quiet and content smiling expression. With a reproachful expression, she annoyedly took a quick glance at Lan Xian. What are you doing, saying this kind of stuff in front of Miss Su? It's not as if she is a person from our circle. If she knows too much, on the contrary, it would not be good for her. She turned and smilingly looked at Su Luo. Miss Su, I speak pretty bluntly. You will not take offense, right? The Jade Lake's fairy wouldn't feel at ease if she didn't suppress Su Luo every moment. Su Luo raised an eyebrow and smiled, declining to comment. The Jade Lake's fairy smilingly looked at Nangong Luyun, shaking his sleeves and pouting playfully, said, Third senior brother, weren't you just chatting very easily with Miss Su? Why is it that now you are ignoring her? Third senior brother is really too much. I just arrived here, and at once, you snubbed Miss Su. How would others see me as? 1. I'm just going to do a direct translation of Beichen Ying's nickname here. The ing in Beichen ing is part of the word shadow in English. Adding the give you the complete English word shadow. So I'm just going to translate it as little shadow rather than little ing z. Chapter 372, Jade Lake's Fairy. 4. Without waiting for Nangong Luyun to speak, she again smilingly said to Su Luo, Miss Su, Nangong is just like this, didn't take care of you satisfactorily before, so please don't mind it. She had the posture of a main female hostess. Su Luo indifferently cast Nangong Luyun a glance, the corner of her mouth rising into a ridiculing arc. It was not that long ago, that this man was determined to hold her hand and lead her walking by in front of everyone while strutting around. He had an appearance of cupping a treasure in the center of his palm. Right now, she seemed to be superfluous, no, not seeming, rather, of course she was superfluous. Could it be she was merely there to fill in the loneliness, emptiness and coldness when the Jade Lake's Fairy was not around? Su Luo had this ridiculing expression as she looked at Nangong Luyun, but this stingy guy didn't even bother to give her a glance and directly acted as if she didn't exist. Men are, truly mercurial. Su Luo's heart was sour, and slanted her head away to look at the landscape outside. Bai Qining was always aware of Li Yaoyao's gentle, soft and tender appearance on the surface, while her heart was incomparably strong. He saw Su Luo's dramatic change, and wanted to say something to rectify this, but was broken off by Su Luo. Su Luo smilingly said, "What taking offense? The Jade Fairy is being overly sensitive." Su Luo conceded to her the position of main female hostess on Nangong Luyun's yacht. She had numerous words that would put the Jade Lake's Fairy on the spot, however, was it worth it? This man's heart, from beginning to end, only had the Jade Lake's Fairy, not a single moment would he not protect her. Again, for what reason, should she vie for him with the Jade Lake's Fairy? What was there that was worth fighting over? Could she even manage to win it over? Even if she was able to win it over, what was the use? However, Su Luo had not anticipated that Nangong Luyun's face would, in an instant, condense into frost. His pair of beautiful eyes was like a millennium-old glacier, revealing sharp, ice-cold rays of light, giving off a trace of cold intent. The Jade Lake's Fairy didn't seem to be aware of it and smilingly said to Su Luo, "That's right, is Miss Su also here to hook some amethyst thorn fishes?" "Came to see the world." Su Luo stingily and lightly replied. The Jade Lake's Fairy saw Su Luo's lonely expression and smiling in a consoling manner, said, "Miss Su, you need not be so broken-hearted, amethyst thorn fishes are usually hard to catch. Even more so with your foundations, therefore, not catching one is reasonable. When I was 5 years old, it was my first time coming, and back then, I also didn't catch a single fish. Therefore, you really needn't be so heartbroken." Once these words were said, the expressions of everyone present were even stranger than before. The Jade Lake's Fairy was immersed in the joy of Su Luo automatically withdrawing and the blow she dealt her, that she became so careless as to not sense the peculiarity in people's expressions. Her smile was as splendid and dazzling as 100 flowers. But a mocking expression flashed through Su Luo's eyes. The Jade Lake's Fairy's heart was thrown into disorder. The person who had the so-called concerned mind was now thrown into upheaval. Such a noble, virtuous and aloof little princess from the Jade Lake Palace, because of Nangong Luyun, let go of her womanly appearance to personally go into battle and ended up humiliating herself. It also could be considered too tough on her. What meanings her words had, everybody was well aware of. Unfortunately, her news lagged behind too much. And she still wasn't aware that Su Luo was now a third rank, and not a good-for-nothing waste anymore. She held the 5-year-old her in comparison to Su Luo, she really thought too highly of herself. Su Luo's eyes that could distinguish black from white was like water, so clear you could see to the bottom. Her gaze met those of the Jade Lake's Fairies, and the corner of Su Luo's eyes poked up as the corner of her mouth hooked up slightly, indifferently saying, "The Jade Lake's Fairy, you mustn't console me. Why is it that I feel more heartbroken the more you try to console me?" The Jade Lake's fairy, this, giving oneself airs of consoling, if the essence of her heart fell short just a little, then wasn't it that the more you listen to her, the more deeply hurt you feel? But Su Luo's truthful sentence was like poking at a bee's nest. One could only see the Jade Lake's fairy's expression freezing. Momentarily, a layer of shallow fog appeared in that pair of huge, clear eyes. She gave off an appearance of having her heart seriously wounded. Chapter 373, Jade Lake's Fairy, 5, with an expression of self-blame and feeling guilty until she almost cried, she said, "Miss Su, are you in the midst of blaming me? But I am truly concerned about you. How could you say such things about me?" Su Luo also didn't expect that the kind of noble, virtuous and icily arrogant Jade Lake's fairy she had first met back then, would in a split second, change into a lovely, pitiful, delicate, white lotus flower. She couldn't help but give her a thumbs up in her heart. She really could act, her performance was truly great. Look at that lovely, pitiful, little appearance. It was a much better act when compared to Lan Xian and their performance earlier. If Lan Xian and them had this kind of acting skills, not to say 100 amethyst thorn fishes, even 1,000 fishes, she would present it to them without blinking an eye. The Jade Lake's fairy was still not finished. Her slender fair hand tugged at Nangong Liuyun's sleeves with an appealing for fairness and justice manner. "Third senior brother, you say, just a moment ago, what I said, isn't it truly because I was concerned about Miss Su? I really didn't expect that her inner heart would be this weak. I really didn't do it on purpose." Nangong Liuyun merely looked at her with an indifferent smile and didn't speak a word. "Third senior brother, why don't you say something? Only you can get back justice for me." Delicate as a white lotus flower, that pair of beautiful eyes was misty with tears. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, everyone would believe that she had suffered endless times of being wronged. Su Luo raised an eyebrow, with a ghost of a smile. She cast a sidelong glance at Nangong Liuyun. She really wanted to see what kind of justice Nangong Liuyun would deal out. Yet, Nangong Liuyun still hadn't stepped forth to declare his position before another man, that had stood by the Jade Lake's fairy's side since the beginning, stepped out. He glared threateningly at Su Luo with an imposing manner. The double-edged sword in his hand suddenly thrust out. "Dare to be disrespectful to Yao Yao, courting death." Li Aotian's voice was proud and coldly detached, his long sword was even more sinister and bone-chilling. It showed no quarter as it thrust toward Su Luo's throat. Nobody would have anticipated that Li Aotian actually said he would take action, and immediately did just that. Moreover, he went straight for a killing maneuver. Also, what kind of person was Li Aotian? He was Jade Lake Palace's younger generation's number 2 master expert. Now, he was already at the 6th rank, merely one short rank below Nangong Liuyun, and nothing more. The ice-cold long sword thrust toward Su Luo's throat. Relentlessly Su Luo's eyes were as serene as water. "Nangong Liuyun, will you look on unfeelingly as I fall in a pool of blood?" The corner of Su Luo's mouth lifted into a fireworks kind of desolate smile. Just when the long sword was at a distance about a hand's width from Su Luo's throat, all of a sudden, a fine, white finger with distinct joints, abruptly appeared, and lightly flicked that long sword. Immediately, that imposing and threatening long sword unexpectedly twisted to the side, cleanly brushing past Su Luo's slim neck. Nangong Liuyun. Li Aotian, utterly discomfited, glared at Nangong. He didn't expect that Nangong Liuyun would take action at the very last second. Hadn't Yao Yao already pulled to stop him? Wasn't he already intimate with Yao Yao to the point that nothing could come between them? Nangong Liuyun slowly stood up, his sideways glance meeting up with the Jade Lake's fairy's gaze. The corner of his mouth was hooked into an extremely weird smile. He reached out his hands to brush his sleeves. He easily flicked away the Jade Lake's fairy's hand that was wrapped around his arm with not the least bit of tenderness, directly and efficiently. The Jade Lake's fairy looked in astonishment at her comforting hand that was just removed. In a daze, she stared fixedly at Nangong Liuyun. "Third senior brother, Nangong Luyun unhurriedly walked to Su Luo's side and stood side by side with her. He smiled a smile that was yet not one at the Jade Lake's Fairy. He then raised an eyebrow and smilingly said, but his tone was deeply cold, "It's good that you still remember I am your third senior brother." Third senior brother, the Jade Lake's Fairy took a step forward, wretchedly looking at this figure that led her soul around in a dreamlike state. "Remember it, I will forever be your third senior brother, but it is only this single identity to you." Nangong Luyun held Su Luo's hand and pulled it up. Chapter 374, Jade Lake's Fairy, 6. Su Luo wanted to withdraw her hand, but he only gripped hers even more tightly. No matter how much strength she used. In front of him, it was like an ant trying to shake a tree, simply unable to move him in the slightest. Nangong Luyun's eyes, without the least bit of pity, met with the Jade Lake's Fairy's pair of wretched eyes. Under his fluid gaze that seemed tranquil, though it hid a hawk-like, sharp, cutting edge, he firmly declared, "Look closely at her. She is Princess Jean, apart from her, there will never be another." Boom, the Jade Lake's Fairy only felt her own head exploding, the blood flowing backwards, and waves of dizziness burst from her forehead. Just a moment ago, they were still good, why was it that in a split second, the situation took such a dramatic turn? In the end, where did the problem come from? The Jade Lake's Fairy's eyes were hazy from tears, lovely and pitiful, "Third senior brother, how could you be like this?" Li Outyen supported the Jade Lake's Fairy who was on the verge of collapse, his expression extremely ugly. His cold and detached gaze swept towards Nangong Luyun. "Nangong Luyun, do you still remember your promise to the Jade Lake Palace?" "Never will I forget it." Nangong Luyun's gaze was sharp and abstruse. His thin, scarlet-red lips hooked up apathetically. "Since you haven't forgotten, then how dare you treat Yao Yao in this way?" Li Outyen, with unbearable anger, loudly hollered, "Do you know how great was the price Yao Yao paid for you? How can you be this ungrateful, as to kick the teeth of your benefactor? Has your conscience been eaten by a dog?" Nangong Luyun's rich black eyes were like the quiet sea under white clouds, tranquil and obscure. He unhurriedly and languidly spoke one sentence, "Don't tell me, you think this king ought to give his heart to repay a kindness?" Li Outyen was immediately choked off. Demanding the arrogant Nangong Luyun to use this way to repay a kindness, you might as well just kill him off straightforwardly. Nangong Luyun indifferently glanced once at the Jade Lake's Fairy, "Yao Yao, if from now on you will be obedient, then you still will be my, Nangong Luyun's, little sister. If on the other hand," what was the meaning of, "if on the other hand," everyone was crystal clear about it. "Third senior brother, don't want." 2 rows of pure tears tumbled from the Jade Lake's Fairy's beautiful eyes. She movingly and sadly, gazed fixedly at Nangong Luyun. His rejection was just that direct and efficient, simply not giving her any leeway to delude herself. She didn't want it. She had set her mind on him since childhood, all these years, she had continually waited for him to come to marry her. But then, one day, he actually informed her that the person he wanted to marry was not her. She could not accept this, was determined not to accept it. Why? Why, just a moment ago, we were still good, and suddenly, it all changed into the circumstances right now. Is it because of second older brother? I can apologize for it. Miss Su, I send my apologies to you. My second older brother was unintentional. He was too furious, thus ended up like this. Will you please forgive us, okay? Such an arrogant and proud Jade Lake's Fairy, had now thrown her self-respect to the ground for Nangong Luyun to trample on. She even admitted to an error and apologized towards Su Luo. Su Luo was messed up until she was at a loss because of the drastic change. Nangong Luyun, this shitty guy, just a moment ago, it still seemed as if he and the Jade Lake's Fairy was in a close relationship where others couldn't step in between them. Now, he had changed into the appearance of clearly setting down the boundary with her. He was really indeed too changeable and fickle, with indeterminate moods that went from overcast to clear. Nangong Luyun watched the Jade Lake's fairy and gave a sigh. Yao Yao, do you really want to know? Even if this answer may injure you. Nangong Luyun's pair of eyes still had that indifferent smile, the corner of his mouth was still hooked into that nefarious, flattering arc. He had a calm and composed expression. His body gave off a completely staying out of it manner. The Jade Lake's fairy's body trembled from head to toe as she thought about it. Finally, she still quietly nodded her head. Yes, even if I die. Li Yao Yao, if I were to die, I want to die with clarity. Nangong Luyun was never a master that had tender, protective feelings for the fairer sex. One only saw him slowly start to talk, making people respect him and feel that he was too high to reach. Chapter 375, Jade Lake's Fairy, 7, Nangong Luyun slowly started to talk, very simple, in fact, I just wanted to probe if my family's Su Luo, this little treasure, would be jealous or not, and that's all. The result is all thanks to your very brilliantly acted friendly feelings, it was also very useful. The Jade Lake's fairy was trembling from head to toe, simply tottering on the verge of collapse. No matter how much she thought, she couldn't understand just now that Nangong Luyun's conduct was actually done to deceive her. He was putting on a play for Su Luo, that slut, to watch, because he just wanted to provoke her to see if she would be jealous or not. How could it be like this? A few months earlier, he was still treating her intimately close. She was the only girl that could get close to him, the only one. Could third senior brother just change this fast? No, it's not, everything was all because of Su Luo, this little slut. If it was not for her, she also wouldn't have landed in this kind of deplorable situation. Even more, third senior brother also wouldn't treat her like this. The Jade Lake Fairy's eyes were like spitting out venom ferociously shooting towards Su Luo. That pair of eyes seemed to want to shoot a huge hole through Su Luo. At this moment, she really wanted to rush up and simply choke the living Su Luo to death. This little slut's fate was really good. At that time, she had dispatched so many people to chase her down and kill her, but she still managed to escape. However, in the future, it would be very difficult to say. She, the Jade Lake's fairy, vowed to dismember her body into 10,000 pieces, to resolve the hatred in her heart. Third senior brother. Just for this kind of woman, you will discard so many years of our feelings. The Jade Lake's fairy spitefully pointed at Su Luo, her eyes were full of bitter anguish. You obviously know that she had been discarded by the crown prince before. When did you start to pick up the worn-out shoes, one, that even the crown prince doesn't want? Smack! A heavy slap was ruthlessly swung onto the Jade Lake fairy's face. Nangong Luyun's pair of eyes seemed to contain icy snow that wouldn't melt in a millennium. His gaze was unwelcoming, cold and unsympathetic, stressing each syllable as he said, "Do you believe that this king will tear your mouth apart?" Nobody knew that Nangong Luyun would suddenly flip out. Usually, he treated Li Yao Yao well and had always looked upon her like a real, blood-related younger sister. Li Yao Yao only needed that one last step to walk into his heart. The relationship between them originally was very close, that nobody could compare to it. The Jade Lake's princess covered her red and swollen cheek with an inconceivable expression as she stared at Nangong Luyun. Her body was tottering, muttering to herself, "You hit me, you actually dared to hit me." They had known each other for more than 10 years, he had gotten furious at a countless number of people and acted violently against them. However, he had always used a soft voice to talk to her. Now, unexpectedly, because of a person he had known for less than a few months, moreover, a good-for-nothing waste of a lowly woman, he hit her. How could the arrogant and self-important Jade Lake's fairy accept this? At this moment, she had nearly gone insane from the pressure she placed on herself. Li Aotian simply could not watch any more of this. The Jade Lake Palace's most favored little princess, the treasure that all the elders cupped in the center of their palm, would suffer this kind of bullying and humiliation here. How could he accept it? Yao Yao, forget it. Not wanting you is his loss, let us go. This slap, he will remember it. Li Aotian's pair of ice-cold, viper-like eyes swept Su Luo a glance. This woman, regardless of whether it was intentional or accidental, her existence obstructed Yao Yao and Nangong's camaraderie. Her existence created a creak in Nangong family's and Li family's cooperation. In his role as Li family's child from a direct descendant, he absolutely would not allow this kind of thing to happen. Therefore, this woman must be killed. Second older brother, the Jade Lake's fairy was absolutely irreconcilable. She didn't want to leave with her tail between her legs in the stance of a loser. Still not going, staying here to make an exhibit of yourself. Li Aotian rarely shouted loudly and furiously at Li Yao Yao. One, worn-out shoes, in this case, could also be translated as loose woman. Meaning she had already slept with the crown prince. I like Su Luo, so I used the literal translation here. Chapter 376, Jade Lake's Fairy, 8. This younger sister had always been clever and quick-witted, her innate gift was even more outstanding. Her only failing was her excessive infatuation towards Nangong. Originally, it was a good thing, and the two families' elders all looked favorably on this. However, if Nangong had no such intentions towards her, then this would become a huge weakness. But, the Jade Lake's fairy was still hesitant, she didn't want to leave like this. Because leaving like this, would mean that the crack between her and Nangong would be hard to mend. She firmly believes that third senior brother's pair of eyes was deceived by that witch. If given time, their relationship would still return to how beautiful it was initially. Li Aotian merely pulled on the Jade Lake fairy's hand, dragging her to walk out with large strides. He loudly bellowed, such a respectable, luxurious yacht, we cannot afford to take, even more, we don't need to take. Still not walking away quickly. The Jade Lake's fairy was ultimately pulled away by Li Aotian. Li Aotian carried the Jade Lake's fairy and jumped onto the skiff, gradually sailing into the distance. A split second of quiet appeared on the luxurious yacht. The occasion seemed a little awkward. Nangong Luyun extended his bony finger and flicked Su Luo's forehead with a sound like the bursting of a chestnut. His smiling expression was devilishly charming and flirtatious. Foolish girl, just a moment ago, you were so heartbroken that you were almost sniveling, right? You still dare to say your heart doesn't have this king? Su Luo was still immersed in this great play with jubilation and deep grief. Now, with one flick from Nangong Luyun, she rebounded back to reality. She gave a snorting sound and used all her strength to shake off Nangong Luyun's hand, turning her face away. What nonsense are you saying? Who was about to snivel? Who do you think you are? Oh, still dare to be hard-mouthed. Just a moment ago who is it that had a weepy, wanting to sob little expression, just like a wife being abandoned by her husband? Nangong Luyun laughingly tapped the tip of her lovely and charming nose, not very happily giving two, humph, anyway, this girl, is also too much. An outside woman had already come and bullied you over your head, but you still silently endured it, allowing other people to bully. Look at you, normally. You often actually bare your fangs and bandish your claws, but at the crucial moment, you faded. Su Luo slanted him a glance. Outside woman. How did she get here? Isn't she still drawn in by a certain someone who doesn't take responsibility? The cagey, rugged face of Nangong Luyun clearly had a self-satisfied and proud smile. Yes, that was an outsider, only this king's Luo girl is an inside person. Don't feel like dealing with you. Su Luo turned her head away to look at the scenery, but her mood mysteriously and unfathomably became better. Not to mention the Jade Lake's fairy. She was also messed with and caught unprepared by this maneuver of Nangong Luyun's. Now, she could calm down her heart and carefully recall all the details. A moment ago, when the Jade Lake's fairy was strutting around in front of her, her heart was indeed somewhat sour and bitter. Could it be she actually, really, started to like Nangong Luyun, this bastard? Su Luo took a furtive look aimed at Nangong Luyun, and saw that he seemed to have sensed it. His gaze just so happened to meet the look she cast at him. Su Luo's thoughts became somewhat frantic and hurriedly evaded his gaze. Her heart started to beat irregularly and her pulse sped up. Now, she had a small taste of what that sentence Nangong Luyun just said. He said he had allowed the Jade Lake's fairy to accompany him to perform a play, to make her see and clearly understand the desires in the depths of her heart. Just when the little person in Su Luo's heart was entangled in an endless dispute, Nangong Luyun only calmly and smilingly watched her. His eyes shone with a burning, glorious radiance. Only now did Beichening hammer Nangong Luyun in the chest, laughing while saying, "This bastard, indeed, you handling matters still exceeds all expectations." This play was also acted very well. If it was not for knowing the inside story, very likely, even I would have been deceived by you. I really thought you and that girl from the Li family had continuous affection for each other. Beichen Palace and the Jade Lake Palace normally had a complicated relationship. Don't just look at Beichen Ying's in front of others saying, "Yao Yao younger sister, this Yao Yao younger sister that," if talking about relationships, their interaction was not as close as he and Su Luo's. Chapter 377, Jade Lake's Fairy, 9, Lan Xian smilingly nodded his head. "Hey, just now," sister-in-law's brows wrinkled together 7 times, coldly smiled 5 times, clenched her fist tightly 3 times. "Second older brother should give some benefits, right?" Nangong Luyun took out a piece of crystal stone from his chest pocket and tossed it to Lan Xian. The corner of his mouth hooked into a shallow smile, his blood-red lips were blood-colored. "You did well." Lan Xian smilingly happily caught that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone, and tossed his head slightly and smugly towards Beichening. Beichening threw himself at Lan Xian, and the 2 childish fools immediately got tied up fighting into a ball. When Su Luo heard their dialogue, she couldn't help but be furious. Okay, good, so originally these people all knew the truth and she was the only one kept in the dark. It caused her inner heart to be tangled up for quite a while. Su Luo furiously glared at Nangong Luyun once, who would have thought that this bastard would still innocently raise both hands with palms up. This cannot be blamed on this king. Before, this king had already told you countless times, the position of Princess Jean, only you, one person, can sit in it. Who told you to always disbelieve it? Su Luo couldn't help but scowl. You make it seem like I really value that position of Princess Jean. Whoever you like to give it to, then give it to them. Beichening and Lan Xian suddenly smiled, and made fists towards Nangong Luyun, as a way of encouragement. "Second brother, the revolution is still unsuccessful, looks like you still need to try harder." Nangong Luyun indulgently rubbed Su Luo's little head with a somewhat weeping smile. This girl was still so hard to wait upon, he had already did it to this degree, yet she was still dissatisfied. In fact, he and Li Yao Yao had grown up together since they were little. As a man, he was not a vegetable. To say he didn't have even a little feeling for her, how could it be possible? It was only because she and Luo girl could not coexist at the same time, so he had no choice but to make a selection. Only from now on, Nangong Luyun's gaze was indecipherable, floating towards the remote and distant sea surface. From now on, Su girl's safety, he would have to spend more thought on. While they were talking and laughing, the yacht had already sailed close to the Amethyst Fish Palace. If you lifted your eyes to look, you could clearly see an amethyst-thorned fish-shaped palace floating on top of the ocean. The closer they got, the more they were able to discover that this amethyst fish palace was simply huge beyond imagination. Su Luo had a hard time estimating the extent of its size. Just at this time, all of a sudden, from the side, a yacht madly rushed forth at high speed and passed Nangong Luyun's extravagant and luxurious yacht. It sailed forward at the front with flying speed. So obscure. Lan Xian came straight out with a cliché. That is the Crown Prince's yacht. Beichening gave a cold snort. Could it be, Li Aotian? Anya Ming half muttered to himself, and opened his mouth to state this. It certainly must be Li Outyan. Li family is usually well known for this wind system magic. In terms of speed, they always were number one. Capable of surpassing our yacht, only he can do it. Lan Xian coldly added. Didn't expect that Li Outyan would be so interesting. Originally, they still believed that the Li family would abandon the treasures in the Amethyst Fish Palace and go home. Who would have known that with a turn of their head, they had joined the Crown Prince's side? Anya Ming cast an unnerving glance at Nangong Luyun, raised an eyebrow and smilingly said, "Don't tell me you don't care a little about Jade Lake Palace turning their head to assist the Crown Prince." Nangong Luyun's gaze was clear and cold. "You think he can help the Crown Prince stand up?" An indifferent short sentence was infused with Nangong Luyun's inexhaustible self-confidence. Bai Qining laughed while nodding his head. "That's right, not even giving a thought to what Nangong Liujue's conduct is like. The Li family is usually noble and aloof from politics. It will be strange if they considered him." Su Luo merely silently retreated to the side. In fact, there was one sentence that the Jade Lake's fairy had said that was correct. If she hadn't appeared, then Nangong Luyun and the Li family's relationship would not become this tense. Nangong Luyun, with one pull, stopped Su Luo, and in passing, enfolded her into his embrace. With a gorgeous, alluring smile, he said, "Little girl, why are you running?" "Who is running? I merely thought to get some fresh air, okay?" Even at the risk of her life, Su Luo refused to admit the truth. Chapter 378, Jade Lake's Fairy, 10, Nangong Luyun watched her with his pupils which were like a lake, deep and pitch black. As intelligent as he was, how could he not know what Su Luo was thinking in her heart? Don't put all the blame on your own body, this conflict had always existed. For every day I don't marry Li Yaoyao, my and the Li family's relationship would not be harmonious for another day. Nangong Luyun smilingly said. Actually, the thing he didn't finish saying was, that the reason why the Jade Lake's Li family settled on him was because their motive was not that simple. However, speaking of the Crown Prince's side on his luxurious yacht. The Crown Prince's mood right now was hard to describe in words. Just using the old idiom extreme sorrow turns to joy was sufficient to summarize everything. Originally, he lost everything to Su Luo, a debt he owed that couldn't be paid off in this lifetime. However, he never expected that in the middle of the ocean would unexpectedly emerge the Amethyst Fish Palace that was rarely encountered every 100 years. This was fine, but he also didn't expect to still come across people from the Jade Lake's Li family. Li Outyan, a grand and stately character at the peak of 6th rank. Li Yaoqi, known as the Jade Lake's Fairy, Eastern Ling country's #1 beauty, talented and good-looking. At such a young age, her innate gift in martial arts had already reached the 5th rank. Her future prospects absolutely would be unlimited and could not be measured. But these two individuals actually boarded his yacht. In addition, they also promised to give him a helping hand after entering the Amethyst Fish Palace. "Aren't you guys partners of Nangong Luyun? Why did you come to help me?" The Crown Prince had some misgivings. He really didn't understand this. Once Li Outyan heard Nangong Luyun, these 4 words, immediately, his complexion became ashen, with both hands clenched tightly into fists. He was obviously furious to the extreme. The Jade Lake Fairy's pair of red, swollen eyes were filled with glistening teardrops. Seeing it made one pity her and made people who saw this heartbroken. More than half of the Crown Prince's soul was stolen away. His heart felt extreme tenderness and pity towards the Jade Lake's Fairy. But in the Jade Lake Fairy's eyes flashed vicious rays of light, stressing every syllable. She said, "Nangong Liujue, do you want to ascend the throne to become emperor?" Eh? The Crown Prince was immediately scared that he jumped up. This kind of unfilial, rebellious words, when the Jade Lake's Fairy said it, it seemed really smooth, completely lacking any apprehension. Without the slightest hesitation, he ordered the servants to retire. Then the Crown Prince covertly asked, "What did you say?" "Nangong Liujue, if you want to become emperor, our Jade Lake's Li family could help you." But you must promise me one thing. The Jade Lake Fairy's eyes were like a viper, giving off a sinister radiance. Coming into contact with the Jade Lake Fairy's gaze, the Crown Prince's heart suddenly jumped from fright. How was it that the charming and gentle illusion, in a split second, vanished so completely? This was a powerful, domineering woman. Her inner heart was definitely not as weak as her outer appearance. The Crown Prince firmly said, "You say it. Go chase back Su Luo, that little slut." The Jade Lake Fairy's voice was dark and cold as she said, "When you have stolen her back from within Nangong Liuyun's hands, that's when our Jade Lakesley family will take action to assist you." The Crown Prince was also not a fool. All at once, he understood the critical point of this matter. He said it all along. Li Outyen and the Jade Lake's Fairy seemed fine. Why didn't they go to Nangong Liuyun's yacht, but rather, come aboard on his yacht? So, it turned out to be because of Su Luo. Looked like this loathsome girl was not forever going to be more of a hindrance than help to him. Able to see Nangong Liuyun and Li family, who he need to be wary of, have a falling out. The happiest about this was none other than the Crown Prince. However, the issue put forth by the Jade Lake's Fairy, this matter, would make things difficult for him. Su Luo, that loathsome girl, is in Nangong Liuyun's hand. You also saw how he treasures that loathsome girl, wanting to steal her back, very difficult. The Crown Prince shook his head. Originally, he also thought that Nangong Liuyun would marry the Jade Lake Palace's, this little princess. However, he didn't expect, from the side, thrust out Su Luo, who unexpectedly stole away all of Nangong Liuyun's soul. Chapter 379, Amethyst Fish Palace. 1. In the wake of that girl constantly demonstrating her extraordinary talent, the Crown Prince also had to admit that before, his vision was not good, letting go of such a hen that could lay golden eggs. Recalling that he owed her 1,500 pieces of green-colored crystal stones, immediately, the Crown Prince's face sank to the point that water could drip out. The Jade Lake's Fairy frowned, with some displeasure. She snorted out, "Isn't she just a good-for-nothing waste? Why are you still hesitant? A good-for-nothing waste?" The Crown Prince suddenly looked at the Jade Lake's Fairy with a speechless expression. That girl's reputation was not good. The label of a good-for-nothing waste was stuck to her body for more than 10 years. Also, because of this, in order to get rid of this burden, he had employed a stratagem to break off the engagement. But was the truth really like this? She could treat Su Qing, who was praised as the new generation's gifted genius, as a rival, then setting up a life-and-death duel with her. She could hook so many amethyst-thorn fishes under thousands of pairs of staring eyes, and strike him until he was too ashamed to show his face. This kind of her, was still that good-for-nothing from that time. Basically, this was completely a different person, all right? The Crown Prince slowly shook his head, stressing each word, saying, "Jade Lake's Fairy, I'm afraid your information is somewhat behind. Could it be you don't know that now, Su Luo is already at the 3rd rank in strength? In her age group, having this kind of cultivation, even if it was not regarded as a genius, it was still considered outstanding." Sure enough, the Jade Lake's Fairy frowned, saying in displeasure, "What? She, actually is a 3rd rank? No wonder that the several maids she sent, each and every one of them never came back. In all likelihood, they were all killed by her." So, it turned out that Su Luo, for so many years past, was concealing her strength and biding her time. In front of people, she was considered a good-for-nothing. No wonder she was able to seduce 3rd senior brother until he was infatuated, head over heels in love. She was really a character. However, merely a 3rd rank. He also merely a 3rd rank and nothing more. Not only that but, the Crown Prince let out a faint sigh, "Jade Lake's Fairy, there is something you are not aware of, don't know what secret is on this loathsome girl's body." Today, her talents shined and seized everyone's eyes. "What do you mean?" The Jade Lake's Fairy frowned. As expected, the Jade Lake's Fairy does not know. "Alas, do you know who hooked the most amethyst-thorn fishes today?" The crown prince's expression was somewhat despondent. This was the deepest pain in his heart. Don't tell me it wasn't third senior brother? The Jade Lake's fairy asked, somewhat astonished. In previous years, the one who hooked the most fish was undeniably third senior brother, there was simply no need for doubt. Not him. The crown prince replied simply. Then who? A person you will never guess, no matter how many tries. The crown prince's expression was very complicated. Don't tell me, that person is, Su Luo. The Jade Lake's fairy uttered in surprise. Afterwards, her mouth hooked into a sneer, and felt that her own notion was simply too absurd. How could it be her? Even if her cultivation now was at the third rank, among this group of people, that was at the very bottom. How could she even hook one fish? Even if she could hook one or two fishes, then her luck was already considered pretty good. But the crown prince's words thoroughly smashed her daydream. You guessed right, today, the person that hooked the most amethyst thorn fish, is not a stranger, but is precisely that loathsome girl. Whenever the crown prince spoke of this, he would fume with rage between gritted teeth. He wished that time would flow backwards, returning him to before he made the bet with her. If it was only this loathsome girl betting with him, then forget it. As it happened, Beichen and those people also all took part in it, making him unable to breach the contract like he wanted to. What did you say? The Jade Lake's fairy, who originally sat on the chair made out of red sandalwood, stood up in a flash. Her pair of eyes were brimming with a burning radiance. She grabbed the crown prince's collar, looking malevolent and vengeful. I order you to say it again. Chapter 380, Amethyst Fish Palace. 2. The crown prince's entire body was almost lifted up by the Jade Lake's fairy. Faced with that pair of very severe and sinister eyes, the crown prince only felt his heart immediately become cold. Undoubtedly, she was as beautiful as a fairy, but why did she give him the feeling of having cold sweat on his back? No matter how much the crown prince thought about it, he couldn't understand. Quickly tell me. How could the Jade Lake's fairy now still be that pure, cold, aloof and proud as if above the common people, that woman? The her right now was a malicious, sinister witch of a woman. The crown prince restrained the chill in his heart, gave a cold snort and deliberately tried to shock the Jade Lake's fairy. What's the harm in letting you know? Today's fishing champion is precisely that loathsome girl. Don't believe me, you can go and ask around. It was under thousands of pairs of staring eyes, who could tell a lie? That is impossible. Only if third senior brother gave some of the ones he hooked to her. How could the Jade Lake's fairy believe it? Humph. This king also wishes this is not true, but under thousands of pairs of staring eyes, all present saw this clearly. That loathsome girl simply and neatly caught 1,500 amethyst thorn fish. The crown prince shook off Jade Lake fairy's hand, and said it while panting with rage. This matter, he originally didn't want to mention it again, however, it was to no avail since the Jade Lake's fairy kept asking. 1,500. Amethyst thorn fishes. Are you certain it isn't the common kind of fish? At this moment, it was not only the Jade Lake's fairy, even Li Outyen was surprised. His pair of eyes was like electricity, staring fixedly at the crown prince. The Jade Lake's fairy had an even more stunned expression as she stared at the crown prince. It was as if she was looking for signs that he was lying on his face. But the crown prince starkly spread out both of his hands. If you guys don't believe me, go out and randomly grab anyone to ask, and everything will be clear. In any case, the matter today, everyone saw it clearly. Not waiting for the Jade Lake's fairy to act, Li Outyen had already flown out, and in a blink of an eye, he came back with a few people he had grabbed. After interrogating them one after another, he was amazed to discover that every sentence the crown prince said was true. Moreover, the most pathetic thing was that this crown prince also actually lost 1,500 green-colored crystal stones to that little slut. The Jade Lake's fairy was simply dumbfounded. Besides being shocked, in addition to jealousy, she also felt humiliated. Now, recalling that matter that happened a moment ago on that yacht, a scarlet color flashed across her face. Now, she finally understood why just now, on third senior brother's yacht, when she mentioned hooking amethyst thorn fish, those few people's expression would be so surprised. She had really underestimated that little slut. No, not merely underestimating her, she had greatly underestimated her. However, 1,500 amethyst thorn fish. In the end, how had she accomplished it? Could it be that on her body, she had an unknown secret? Even if the Jade Lake's fairy pondered until her brain became stupid, she would still fail to think that the common Su Luo was actually a space system mage. Moreover, she still had the little divine dragon to remind her to mix some celestial spirit water into the fish food. Time slowly passed. Now, the yacht had already arrived in front of the Amethyst Fish Palace. Li Outyen patted her slender shoulder, his voice was deep and low, "Don't let your imagination run wild. Find an opportunity to grab that girl over here and interrogate her, then we'll know. If I didn't guess wrong, that girl ought to have hidden secrets on her body." Li Outyen never considered if the other party would cooperate with the questions from his interrogation. This was because he had hundreds and thousands of methods that would make the other party obediently tell the truth. A group of people walked quickly out of the yacht on foot. The imposing and vast amethyst fish palace that had no end at a glance, now stood before everyone's eyes. Li Outyen stepped off the yacht and directly rushed towards the amethyst fish palace. This was due to the reason that the earlier you entered the amethyst fish palace, implied that your chances would be greater. But, he was forced to stop his footsteps in front of the palace gates. The doors to the amethyst fish palace did not directly open wide, that glowing, vermilion red-colored palace gates was tightly shut. Chapter 381, Amethyst Fish Palace. 3. Li Outyen let out a cold humph, and stamped his feet after concentrating strength into his soles. He drew the huge, double-edged sword he carried on his back. That sword, like a cold streak, flashed past with a threatening chill. One could only see Li Outyen lifting that huge sword up high and brandishing it towards that solid palace gate and chopping down. A burst of violent force rippled through the air, and it seemed as if the ground was vibrating. However, that seemingly thin palace gate didn't even move an inch. On the gate, not a trace of it having been chopped could be seen. How could it be like this? He was a 6th rank expert. This was impossible. Li Outyen did not believe it was possible. Once more, he concentrated all his spirit power and poured it completely into that huge sword. The tip of the sword shot out an explosive force. One could only hear swoosh, 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 the ear-splitting sounds of the atmosphere being fractured. This single chop was unsurpassingly vigorous and deft. However, when this sword chopped down, the vermilion red-colored panels of the hinged gate seemed to be emitting a faint radiance. It seemed like a skin-like coating was wrapped entirely around its body as a protective layer. Not only was there no trace of any difference to the gate, on the contrary, Li Outyen's huge swords was heavily ricocheted back. If it weren't for Li Outyen's speedy reaction and promptly grabbing hold of the handle of that huge sword, then this time, he would have lost a lot of face. This hinged gate was sealed by an expert. Li Outyen, with extreme anger, bellowed out loudly. The Crown Prince's expression immediately became somewhat malicious. Their yacht had tightly sailed forward and slowly overtook everyone to be first, just so they could reach the Amethyst Fish Palace a step ahead of everyone else. It was in order to be the earliest to enter the Amethyst Fish Palace. Countless people from the older generation left behind directions saying that for the earliest ones to enter, their odds of obtaining treasures would be that much greater. But no one ever said that to enter the Amethyst Fish Palace, you still needed to open the seal on the gate. But now, with this delay, Nangong Liuyan's yacht, in the blink of an eye, had arrived. Bei Chening was the first to jump out of the yacht. Bei Chening took it upon himself to constantly strike at the Crown Prince. Smiling happily, he said to Lan Xian, "Oh, I was under the impression that some had already gone inside the palace earlier. I didn't expect that instead, so many people would enthusiastically stand in front of the gate to wait for us. Lan Xian raised an eyebrow and smilingly said, "Idiot, do you really believe they are standing in formation to welcome us? They are wishing that we could disappear at once for good. Of course, it is because they couldn't enter. If they could go in, they would have already run in until we couldn't even find their shadows." The crown prince's complexion was ashen as he slanted a glance at Lan Xian. This despicable fellow again emulated Beichen Ying's inclinations, all of his words were very poisonous. The corner of Lan Xian's mouth hooked into a shallow smile, and his chin was tilted up as he slanted a glance at the crown prince. That posture exhibited the air of a young master from an influential aristocratic family, and as an elder brother, it was 100% emphatic. Li Aotian's tries were no good, adding in the Jade Lake's ferry was also no good. Finally, they added the group of people the crown prince brought, and as before, it was still no good. The crown prince became somewhat anxious. This was owing to the fact that the amount of time the Amethyst Fish Temple stayed was limited. Every 100 years, it would appear once. Every time it appeared, it would stop over for one day. Therefore, every minute and every second was precious. Whenever the crown prince thought of that pile upon piles of treasures that he had no chance of obtaining, it was like his heart was crying blood. Ever since Nangong Luyun appeared, afterwards, the Jade Lake Fairy's gaze would unblinkingly stare at him with beautiful, luminous eyes. Since young to adult, she had liked him for so many years, how could she give up just because of one sentence of rejection from Nangong? Even more so because although Li Yaoyao's outward appearance was extremely delicate, her heart was strong and unwaveringly determined, such that many men could not hold a candle to her resoluteness. Seeing Nangong Luyun so naturally holding Su Luo's hand as he slowly walked over, the Jade Lake's fairy sucked in a deep breath. She calmed down her heart and state of mind, her face blossoming with a light and pure smiling expression. "Third senior brother, since everybody all came because of this Amethyst Fish Palace, why not open this seal together?" Nangong Luyun originally ignored her, until Su Luo bumped his arm, only then did he indifferently cast a glance at the Jade Lake's fairy. He noncommittally raised an eyebrow. Chapter 382, Amethyst Fish Palace. 4. The Jade Lake Fairy's appearance stiffened for a split second, but she still maintained that arc at the corner of her mouth. Her smile was as gorgeous as a flower, as if the unpleasantness on the yacht from before never happened. Could third senior brother still be taking offense at Yao Yao's lack of manners from before? If that is so, then Yao Yao Fairy will apologize to Miss Su. The corner of the Jade Lake Fairy's mouth contained a shallow, indifferent smile, with a composed expression on her face. It seemed as if she was still that extraordinary and refined Jade Lake's fairy. And he was still that third senior brother who pampered and spoiled her. Nangong Luyun gave a smile that was not quite one as he cast her a glance, but he did not speak. Su Luo saw this, and a trace of precaution flitted across her heart. If the Jade Lake's fairy was still pretending to be that lovely, pitiful, delicate white lotus flower from before, then she would be easy to deal with. However, she could calm her mood within such a short amount of time, giving a tranquil and calm appearance without a ripple, as if nothing had happened. It was just like the first time when Su Luo saw her, so extraordinary, refined and above the common people, that Jade Lake's fairy. This kind of forbearance, this kind of shrewdness, really made people afraid of the consequences. Recalling before on the yacht, able to upset her until she exposed her real nature, it could clearly be seen how seriously upsetting those words by Nangong Luyun were to her. However, from now on, if Su Luo wanted to see the appearance of her losing control, then it certainly would be difficult. The crown prince clenched his teeth, he squeezed out a trace of a smile from the corner of his stiff lips, and said to Nangong Luyun, "Second younger brother, looking at the time passing in seconds and minutes, don't tell me you are not anxious. Wouldn't it be better if we all work as one to open this seal together?" Nangong Luyun indifferently cast a glance at the crown prince, lowered his gaze and in an indulgent and spoiling manner, rubbed Su Luo's hair. "This king's Luo girl has the final say. Immediately, the Crown Prince's expression hardened. The Jade Lake Fairy's expression, for only a split second, was simply, extremely ugly. She grinded her teeth before her face perked up into an unperturbed, smiling expression as if nothing happened, and said, "Miss Sue, behind us, there are so many people watching impatiently, you wouldn't let everyone be disappointed, right?" Su Luo glanced back for a look. Sure enough, she saw a large group of densely crowded people. Following the Jade Lake Fairy's words, they violently nodded their heads towards her. Their movements were so in sync as if they were one, very much identical, as if she was blocking their path. It was as if she was a heinous, great sinner. Su Luo rolled her eyes at Nangong Luyun in disgruntlement. "Who wants me to be the villain in your place? Wishful thinking. I order you to get out of my way." Once these words were out, everyone present immediately sucked in a cold breath of air. This was merely ordinary dialogue in Su Luo's eyes, but looking at everyone's eyes, this was completely not like that. No, they were like all the people in Su Manor on that day, their hearts were trembling at least 3 times, having been shaken by Su Luo's remarks. His Highness Prince Jean was what kind of savage and bloodthirsty person? Able to make him indulge her to this degree, speaking based on reason, that Miss being loved so much ought to burn incense and worship Buddha in thanks, right? However, this Miss she actually still had a scolding tone, not only that, she also had an unhappy appearance. Who did she think she was? But she was confronting Prince Jean, the temperamental, with his moods indeterminately going from overcast to clear, savage and ruthless, that His Highness Prince Jean. She was simply courting death. Now, practically everyone was regretfully looking at Su Luo, because in their eyes, how could His Highness Prince Jean not get angry? Even the Jade Lake's Fairy, who had always been familiar with Nangong Luyun, now, that pair of quick-witted, beautiful eyes had a burning radiance, similar to the rainbow-colored sunlight. It was brimming with expectation, hope, happiness, and rejoicing in other people's misfortune kind of expression while looking at Su Luo. In her eyes, Nangong Luyun's temperament had always been bad, and what he hated the most was disobedience and refusal. However, what made everyone be taken aback, and also made the Jade Lake's Fairy bite her gums until they tore into pieces, was that the scene that their eyes had expected completely did not take place. On the contrary, Nangong Luyun moved in closer still, more intimately smiling at her, in a fawning manner as if trying to win her favor. Chapter 383, Amethyst Fish Palace, 5, Nangong Luyun gave a devilishly charming smile. How could this king be willing to let you act as a villain? Okay, this king will put forth the effort, and all the credit will be assigned to you. Heavens, God, was this man really His Highness Prince Jean? That legendary, rumored to be bloodthirsty, cruel and excessively ruthless, a commander who directly cut off the arms of a princess without blinking an eye, that His Highness Prince Jean. This was simply too uncharacteristic of him. Jade Lake's Fairy was even more furious, to the point she had bitten her lip until it bled. Her hands were clenched tightly into fists, the veins hidden within the sleeves of her garment had burst out and were bulging, continuously trembling. Under countless gazes, Su Luo knew when to stop. This way is actually pretty good, you should go quickly. Saying this, she directly pushed Nangong Luyun to the front of the wooden hinged gate. Her movement seemed as though she was quite familiar with him. This action again raised endless exclamations of alarmed surprise from everyone. An average person who would dare turn his back to others? Let alone when it comes to an expert, like His Highness Prince Jean. An ordinary person simply couldn't even get close to his back, all right? But not only was Su Luo able to do it, she also did it with extreme familiarity. It was clear to see how much His Highness Prince Jean trusted her. Ignoring all the shocked gazes in her surroundings, Su Luo indifferently stood at the side, watching Nangong Luyun with an expression that was calm and unruffled despite being in the midst of chaos. Bei Qining had both his hands at his waist, sizing up this imposing building, looking at it up and down. He couldn't help but lament. Everyone said the Amethyst Fish Palace was grand and majestic, today at last, I'm finally able to see it, as expected it lives up to its reputation. Lan Xian kicked him with his foot, don't waste unnecessary words, hurry over to help open the seal. Nangong Luyun swept them with a faint glance, and firmly lifted his hands, no need. Could it be that His Highness Prince Jin wanted to open the seal with only his own strength? This was not possible, right? Just now, when all of those people had gathered together their strength, that gate didn't even move a single jot. Nangong Luyun quietly sized up that gate, carefully observing, his figure seemed to have stood there for a long time, as if since the ancient times, his back was lean and peaceful. His body seemed to have a faint layer of radiance. The surroundings were very quiet, everyone was stupidly watching His Highness Prince Jin. None of them understood why he was standing there completely motionless. Approximately 1 hour later, the corner of Nangong Luyun's mouth suddenly raised into an evidently smiling expression. He raised the sleeve of his garment carelessly, and directly in front of him, a rapidly rotating circular halo took form. Within this diagram, it seemed to contain inexhaustible spiritual power. Go! Nangong Luyun burst out loudly. That circular halo then gushed forth towards the palace gate in a manner akin to the raging waves in a stormy sea, with a vastly imposing manner, an unstoppable force. Bang! When the circular halo plowed into the palace gate, it issued the sound of a heavy hit. The air sent zing, zing noises, this part of the world seemed to rock violently. The seal is about to be broken, the face of everyone's deathly pale complexions was reflected in the light of the circular halo. The curtain of light enveloping the palace gate that originally obstructed everyone from entering, was currently cracking open with a speed visible to the naked eye, gradually turning into nothingness. All the people in the surrounding area had retreated far away, for fear that the powerful waves of spirit power would affect them. However, their facial expressions right now were shocked to the extent of incredulous disbelief. Such a formidable strength, such a fierce wave of spiritual force. In addition, what was even rarer was that His Highness Prince Jin's full use of his spirit power, had in the end, practically reached the level of perfection. It simply made people admire him to the point of prostrating themselves in adoration. People able to come to the amethyst-thorned island could not be ordinary. They had more or less already seen other 7-rank experts, but they simply hadn't seen anyone as formidably powerful as His Highness Prince Jin. Jade Lake's fairy was foolishly gazing at Nangong Luyun with deep love, her pair of beautiful eyes was glittering with such worship that she nearly became an imbecile. His 7-rank strength was nearly negligible in difference with her father, who was at the 8th rank. If they fought with each other, the outcome was simply too hard to guess. Chapter 384, Amethyst Fish Palace, 6, at such an age, possessing this kind of strength. Jade Lake Fairy's eyes narrowed slightly, both of her fists were clenched. This kind of man, how could she so easily give him up? No, even if she died, she would also never abandon her love for him. She would do everything to obstruct other women. Jade Lake's Fairy quietly swept a glance at Su Luo, a trace of ice-cold killing intent flashed through her beautiful eyes. A single loud bang sound could be heard. The seal on the palace gate that the combined power of the Crown Prince's group couldn't even shake a fraction, was nevertheless opened solely by Nangong Luyun's strength. Under this contrast, a conclusion had been drawn about both sides' strength. The Crown Prince's expression was somewhat stiff. Seeing the Amethyst Fish Palace's gates slowly opening, he surreptitiously sent a meaningful glance to Li Outyan. Li Outyan paused a little, then faintly nodded his head. Not waiting for Nangong Luyun to collect himself, the Crown Prince condensed all his spirit strength into both of his legs. His body was like an out-of-control wild horse, as he abruptly rushed towards the inside of the palace. Li Outyan was also like that, but he still pulled at the Jade Lake's Fairy, and in passing, easily led her inside. Bastards! Bei Chening cursed darkly, what kind of people are these? They were unable to open the seal themselves, fine. They asked Nangong, who opened it, yet they slipped away so quickly like this. Anya Ming swept him a look. Don't just waste words, we should also hurry and enter. If we're late, and that amethyst crystal fish were to be found by them, it would not be so wonderful. Lan Xian promptly nodded. Other treasures, we couldn't care less, but we must get our hands on that amethyst crystal fish. Whoosh, 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 the three people's shadows passed rapidly, flying towards the inside of the palace. However, very quickly, they felt something was off. They turned their heads and found that Nangong and Su Luo was actually missing. What's going on? Bei Qining was so worried that he shouted towards the surging tide of people. At this time, the violent surging stream of people were constantly trying to squeeze inside. Each and every one had bloodshot eyes as they charged ahead, fearing that if they were late, the treasures would be taken away by someone. That cruel struggle of risking one's life in a race against time was a scene that was simply indescribable using words. With great difficulty, they waited until the crushing crowd altogether rushed past, and Bei Qinying's trio finally saw the couple arriving slowly. Bei Qining was so anxious that smoke was about to come out, and he urgently shouted, "My great His Highness Prince Jean, how could you still be so leisurely, calm and collected? Any later and the amethyst crystal fish will be gone." Because of what amethyst crystal fish? Why was everyone fighting to obtain it? It was said that every time the amethyst fish palace appeared, there will be a treasured amethyst fish inside. This treasured amethyst fish did not have any other skills besides spitting out crystal stones. Just like the manner of a silkworm spitting out silk and a hen laying eggs, this amethyst fish could spit out crystal stones. Moreover, it was not only once a day, but it spits out according to the 3 meals timetable, so 3 pieces a day. If you obtain this amethyst crystal fish, then in the future, you wouldn't need to worry about crystal stones. Furthermore, there were no rules to the crystal stones it disgorged. It was said that it depended completely on luck and a person's character. If the character was bursting with greatness, then spitting out a purple crystal stone was also possible. And also, this amethyst fish's lifespan was only 100 years. Until the next time the amethyst fish palace opened, the former amethyst fish would have accomplished its glorious task and retired from use. Since it was like this, the amethyst fish was still the main target that all the influential parties wanted control of. Su Luo could understand Bei Qinying's edginess. However, Nangong Luyun did not seem to be in the least bit of hurry. He raised an eyebrow slightly with a calm and composed manner, and dismissed Bei Qining with just 4 words, "You guys go first." "What about you?" Bei Qining asked in a loud voice. "Don't tell me that the 3 of you are still no match for those few useless people." Nangong Luyun smiled devilishly, raising an eyebrow while watching Bei Qining and them. Chapter 385, Amethyst Fish Palace, 7. Bei Qining looked at Su Luo, so furious that he was about to say something, but was glared down by Nangong Luyun. Finally, Bei Qining merely flung his sleeves in a manner of, since the jar was already broken, might as well throw it. "Fine, do as you please. I hope that this time, the amethyst fish will be taken away by Li Yao Yao and company, to infuriate you guys to death." Nangong Luyun had a smile on his face as he looked at Su Luo but did not speak. Bei Qinying's group of 3 swept Su Luo one final glance and glared severely at Nangong Luyun with an being angry having no other alternative appearance. Finally they launched into full speed like a shooting star and disappeared from in front of them. Su Luo glanced at Nangong Luyun, frowned and said, "In fact you needn't be like this, I don't need you to keep me company." Even if Bei Qining and them didn't openly say it, however, Su Luo could also roughly guess at why Nangong Luyun didn't immediately follow after them to rapidly move forward together. It was because those individuals' speed, she was unable to keep up with. As a result, he would rather miss the chance at a treasure and still insist on keeping her company by her side as they slowly strolled on. They were as leisurely as if strolling through their own backyard garden. And with regards to that amethyst crystal fish, he basically let things slide. Nangong Liuyan's beautiful eyes were as deep as a pool containing a secretive, shallow smile as he lightly kissed her forehead. This king hasn't said it, you actually perceived everything, really, it's like your heart is linked to this king's. You tell me, in this lifetime, besides this king, who else can you marry? Su Luo couldn't help but to hold her forehead and gasp. This guy, no matter what topic, how could he always turn it back into pressing her to marry him? As if he had the intention of only marrying her and no other. Only heard of other men hating to get married, but never heard of a woman hating being asked to be married. Su Luo tried very hard to return the conversation back to the topic again. Don't tell me you are not worried? That amethyst crystal fish sounds like it would be quite amazing. If you obtain it, in the future, your strength will absolutely rise up a huge step. No matter how good the amethyst fish is, how could it be compared to you? Nangong Liuyan gestured with his hand, not minding it in the least. His beautiful dark eyes contained a roguish, alluring smiling expression. You must be very moved by this king's deed. Are you moved to the extent that you will give your heart to me? Nangong Liuyan's whole body was suffused with a faint luster. One tall and one short, the two figures stood just like this. Nangong Liuyan's tall and straight body set off Su Luo to look even more dainty and beautiful. The distance between the two was very close. Su Luo could clearly smell the great smelling, masculine fragrance on his body. That kind of strong, and quite pure fragrance, was like an intoxicating fog. Su Luo felt that her heart was beating somewhat strongly and unconsciously turned her face away. Nangong Liuyan loved to death her shy little appearance. He didn't lay her bare, that pair of deep, dark, beautiful eyes were smiling, quietly looking at her. Su Luo gave a clear cough, paused a little, and again with great difficulty, tried to carry things back to the proper subject. You really won't regret it? Later, you are not allowed to say it was because of me that caused you not to get the amethyst fish, then force me to marry you in compensation. Su Luo had no choice but to plan ahead, because this guy really could do this kind of thing. A crafty expression flashed through Nangong Liuyan's eyes, but his face had an appearance of sighing helplessly. You actually guessed it, how could this be good? Because of this Su Luo was angrily tied in a knot. She furiously glared at Nangong Liuyan. But Nangong Liuyan only smilingly pinched her nose. Okay, not going to continue teasing you for fun. But Luo girl, could it be that you still haven't discovered what is your strongest point? Su Luo thought for a while, but alone, she could not think of an idea. She couldn't help asking suspiciously, what is it? Seeing this girl in front of his eyes, with her beautiful, confused, captivating eyes opened wide, a soft, spoiling and indulging mood appeared in Nangong Liuyan's heart. He smilingly pulled her along by the hand, walking unhurriedly. He spoke one word while walking, luck. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.